Okay, so we should be live right now. I'm going to wait for this to actually show up in my control panel. All right, so it looks like we are live. Okay, cool. So welcome, Destiny. So I guess the way this all set up was somebody on Twitter tweeted at both of us and I guess asked us if we'd be interested in having like a debate or discussion on veganism. And I wasn't sure like what your stance on this whole topic was, and like I said, sure, I'm down with having a debate or a discussion with you about veganism. And from what you posted on Twitter, it looks like you're mostly or like halfway convinced about the whole like the ideological principles of veganism. So like I'm sure you know. Okay, good idea. I'm sure you understand my whole side of this whole thing. I think the animal agriculture industry is completely unethical, unjustifiable. I think it's wrong to kill and eat animals for food if you don't have to. So why don't you just talk about your position on the whole thing?
Yeah, so I guess I guess my goal is going to be to present an argument, an ethical argument in favor of meat eating, or a moral one. And then to run through, I guess, some of yours. I think there are a lot of arguments that people use in favor of veganism that aren't really legitimate arguments.
Right.
But I understand that this is, I feel very strongly about a lot of views I have, but this is one of those things where in like 50 to 100 years, especially if lab grown meat continues to make progress, I can see this as being something that we look back on and think like, what the fuck were we thinking? Like, so yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about things. And then I also kind of just feel bad for you because I look at your conversations with people like no bullshit, and I see you like talk to a lot of like really fucking stupid meat eaters. So
yeah. Like people always say that I attack low hanging fruit, but it's not really the case. It's really those are the only people who will bother to have a debate with me.
yeah, no, I understand. And honestly, like if I had to choose a side with more intellectual integrity, like honestly, most people that eat meat are retarded as fuck anyway. Like you have people that own animals and are like crying and crying that like Cecil the lion died, but then they eat like fucking millions and millions of pounds of beef like every year, and it's like it seems a little bit inconsistent to me. But yeah.
Right. Okay. So why don't we just have a why don't you talk about your side of the story? Maybe go through some of the reasons why you think it might be ethical or justifiable to eat meat right now, like for
Sure.
you.
So basically, the way that I kind of set up my argument is, I guess it's a little bit axiomatic in that I just define the fact that humans exist on a different level than animals, and that gives us the right to do whatever to them. Basically, the way that I kind of draw this distinction is that animals aren't really capable of reciprocating social value the same way that people are. So, for instance, if we can have like a social standard of values amongst humans, I can say, you know, like we shouldn't kill each other, we shouldn't steal from each other, et cetera, et cetera. Other humans can respect that. They can, if they're too young to, they can grow to respect it, right? They're capable of like intellectually recognizing that thing. Whereas animals, for the most part, are not, except maybe with very few exceptions, although I'm not even sure how real that is. So for instance, I could respect a lion's right to life as much as possible, or a cow's right to life or whatever, but these animals will never share that same respect with me. And to take it further, will also be constantly killing other animals in the wilderness as well. I can never hold them to any kind of moral or ethical standard. It's kind of like how I approach it.
Okay, so I think I even discussed this a little bit with No Bullshit and the Warskis.
Okay.
You're basically saying social contracts are what essentially make it right or wrong to kill an animal. So because an animal can't form a social contract with you, therefore it's okay to kill an animal.
Oof, yeah, that's
Like
it.
that is your argument. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, well, the thing is, like, this kind of falls apart when you put this in an anthropocentric context, because if a human being can't form a social contract with you, does that make it okay to kill that human being? So, like, I'm not even talking about, okay, like, horrible, violent. I'm not even talking about horrible, violent criminals. Like, obviously, when they break a social contract, we put them in jail or prison or something like that. What about like uncontacted tribes people where if they see you, they'll like try to attack you and kill you on sight? Do you think it's okay to massacre like indigenous populations who have been like uncontacted and are violent towards any outsiders?
Yeah, so the way that I to address your earlier points and then to move to the tribes people, like I would argue that we already do to some extent accept a kind of a lower class of treatment for people that don't reciprocate values. You already brought up people like prisoners, people that murder, right? If somebody steps into your property to kill you, then you immediately remove all respect from them, right? If they right. And then even you could even extend that further, as fucked up as it sounds, to people with severe mental illness as well, right? Like we treat them as lower class citizens. Oftentimes they are required to have permanent caretakers. They can be restricted to certain facilities. To take it a step further for tribes people, I guess I would kind of lean back on that earlier argument that I know that humans are capable of being cognizant of social contract. So even if they weren't currently, they have the potential to be so. But to take it a step further, we'll assume in your world that they're past that point. They're all in their 30s or 40s or whatever, and they're never going to grow to that level. Then I don't know if morally I would say like, oh, well, it's not okay to I guess genocide that group of people since they're never capable of reciprocating that social contract.
Right. Like you don't see that as sort of a double standard where this really doesn't become something about a social contract. It's really more to do with you just being kind of biased to your own species in a sort of illogical way.
Well, I mean, I would argue that I am biased towards my own species for sure, because it is my species, right? Because you have a chance. Like, yeah. For me personally, that's where a lot of the social contract comes from, right? Like, yeah, it's a self-interested point of view. Like, I respect your rights to live and exist because I want you to respect my rights to live and exist, right? I'm a human, you're a human. We share these kinds of values with one another. And again, like that's something that we can reciprocate, I guess, because we're humans, that other animals can't necessarily reciprocate. So I would agree with you in calling it a bias. I don't know if I would call it an irrational bias. I think it is founded on some rationality, but.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to say social contract is what makes it okay to kill animals, but in the situation I gave you, you wouldn't accept that for a human being. You don't find that sort of hypocritical and sort of a double standard?
Wait, where I wouldn't accept what for a human being?
Well, no, sorry. Like if a human being can't form a social contract with you, you wouldn't say, okay, we have to murder that person. Whereas you would say,
oh,
like,
no,
that's totally acceptable.
Yeah, I said I would. If you came across a tribe of people, or whatever, and these people were never ever like I was assuming, like in your world, say these people were past the point of ever being integrated into society, and they will constantly try to kill other people. I would say that in that case, yeah, sure, it's okay. I would find it morally, I guess, acceptable to genocide that group of people or whatever.
Really, like even if. I can't remember the exact name of this tribe, but there's this very small island where a tribe of people live. They're, for the most part, they've never really been contacted. I think there's one, like the British at one point contacted them, but they had a really bad experience. And since then, they've been super, super hostile to outsiders. Like they just shoot bows and arrows at anyone who tries to come by their island. Well, like the thing is, we understand that these people, like, they're human beings, they're sentient, they can experience pain and suffering. And even though like they're primitive and everything, and they have like a violent culture, at least they're violent to outsiders, we can sort of respect their right to life. We can see them as human beings. So it's just completely unnecessary to go up to them and just completely massacre them all. And that's sort of how I see the animal agriculture industry. Like, okay, even if they can't, reciprocate rights or, respect a social contract, you're just causing harm and suffering for absolutely no reason.
So there's kind of two parts to that. I guess on the first one, if it was completely and totally avoidable, if there was absolutely nothing to gain by, I guess, genociding an island full of these tribes people or whatever, I would argue it's probably unnecessary. I don't know if I would attack that from a moral or ethical point of view, though, and just say that this is a waste of resources or something, which you can probably make similar arguments about the animal agriculture industry as well. For the second part of that, oh, fuck, what was the second part of what you said? I just lost it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was basically saying, I see the animal agriculture industry as completely unnecessary, sort of like how it would be completely unnecessary to go over to that island and just massacre those group of people for like pretty much no reason. Like I just don't see the purpose of the animal agriculture industry.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got it. So for the second thing, in terms of like how I construct rights or civil liberties or ethical, moral behavior, whatever for people, typically my default assumption is that everything is okay unless it's not okay to do so, right? And then when something
that's a little confusing. Maybe.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm loving it. So everything is okay unless it's not okay to do so. What makes something not okay is generally when you're infringing on the rights of another human. So for instance, is it morally ethical to like masturbate, right? Well, if you're not hurting anybody else, it's fine. Is it morally ethical to smoke weed or drink alcohol? Sure thing, that's fine. Is it morally ethical to steal something from somebody else or to rape or murder somebody? Well, no, because now you're infringing on the rights of another human, a person whose rights we respect, right? And then when it comes to somebody like animals, right, because I've, at least in my worldview, I've set it up to where I don't really respect the rights of anybody that's not capable of reciprocation. Do what you wish, right, is essentially my approach to it.
Okay, so indigenous tribes people, like if you just so wish to, maybe you just enjoy killing people, you think it's not a moral issue to just massacre an entire island of indigenous people who just, who are hostile to outsiders.
If they're not capable of reciprocating, then yeah, go for it.
Really?
It sounds really cold, but yeah.
Okay. Like I see another issue with this this argument of the social contract argument, because like you could use that to justify the Holocaust, because like, okay, Nazis can just say, well, we don't give a shit about forming a social contract with Jews, so we can just kill them. Like it's almost like a might makes right argument.
Hold on, let me write these down so I don't forget these. So the thing about that is that when you talk about Jews, right, now you're starting to split people up into different groups of people. And I would have to ask what your rationale is for doing something like that. So for me personally, I don't put groups of humans above other groups of humans. Some people might do it on the basis of race or gender. Men are better than women. White people are better than black people, Asian people, or whatever, right? Like that. But if you're going to make that kind of assertion that you want to draw a line or a distinction between like Jews and non-Jews, then you have to ask for a reason why. You have to give a good, rational, logical argument for that. And I don't think the Nazis provided any kind of compelling argument for why Jews were worthy of extermination, And insofar as my definition goes, I think that Jewish people are probably plenty capable of engaging in social contract or any other kind of, human-like behavior. I think most humans are. Or if not all humans are, right, aside from the severely mentally disabled or murderers or rapists or whatever. So I don't think that you could use my philosophy to defend Nazism, because Nazism calls for a special argument for why Jews are subhuman, which I don't think they adequately ever provided.
Okay, so then this sort of comes back to the name the trait argument, though. I guess you are choosing social contract, but like the issue I see there is if you're going to say social contract is what ultimately makes something like morally justifiable, then basically anyone at any point could just say, like, I don't choose to have a social contract with you. And therefore, like again, it's basically a might makes right argument. You're not, like, what you consider moral doesn't have anything to do with actual outcome of a situation. It's just whether or not somebody can like reciprocate these moral values with you.
Yeah, so for the first, so this is a two-parter. To take the first part on, when you say anybody can leave a social contract, I mean, they can. People can leave a social contract anytime they want. If I want to, I can walk across the street and murder my neighbors to steal their shit if I want to. But as soon as I exit that social contract, then other people no longer have the responsibility to maintain that social contract with me, right? The police will show up, or somebody else could kill me in the act of my robbery and whatnot. For the second part, what you consider moral has nothing to do with the outcome of the situation. I'm not very much an ends justify the means person. I think that morality should be considered through and through. So, for instance, you get into weird territories when you're like, should you consider the outcome when you're talking about morality? Like things like the trolley problem at that point, right? If you could push somebody in front of a moving train to save four people, would you do it? Or would you kill one person to harvest organs to save 10 people? Like I feel like you get into weird areas that I don't usually consider morality based on outcomes, but more on the actions that you're committing.
Well, this isn't even really a trolley situation here. It's like you could either choose to cause the suffering death of animals, or you could choose not to. It's not like you have to kill somebody to save a bunch of other people. Like, no, you're literally just choosing, am I going to kill these animals or not?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, in that situation, I agree. I was just speaking to the general idea of considering morals based on the outcome. So, and again, like to back up for choosing the suffering and death of animals, this is where I wouldn't draw a distinction between the suffering, death of animals versus the suffering and death of a plant. Like these things I would consider to be.
Well, plants aren't sentient and they have no consciousness. Like they can't suffer.
Um, I mean, I feel like suffering is a pretty loaded word. We could go into that specifically, or sentience. I guess we can go into that as well.
You actually think plants are sentient?
Well, no, I was going to say, why does sentience matter? What do you mean by sentience?
Oh, sentience, like having consciousness, the ability to have pain and suffering, have thoughts, feelings, emotions, experience life from a subjective point of view.
Gotcha. So I guess so I have a very cold view, I guess, of all of this. So I don't. Are you spiritual at all, or do you believe in religion or anything?
No, like I'm not religious at all. I don't believe in any kind of God. I guess I wouldn't call myself spiritual like necessarily, but
Gotcha. So when I look at things like pain and suffering, this is all going to sound really cold, I'm sorry, but like when I look at things like pain and suffering, like these are essentially mechanisms that organisms have to avoid negative stimuli, right? Essentially,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
If you hit an animal, if you hit a person, right, you know, you have some built-in natural responses, right? You cover your face, you turn your back, you know, maybe you do things to avoid pain, right? Animals are much the same way. If you kick an animal or kick a dog, oftentimes they'll cry out for help, or they'll run away, right? But I think you can there are similar types of avoidance mechanisms in plants as well, right? Certain plants will grow towards sunlight to maximize nutrients. I'm sure that there are different ways that plants do things to maximize their gathering of nutrients, right? Weeds will grow deeper roots to try to take nutrients from grass and shit. Like I just view these all as like I guess like mechanisms of things that exist. I don't necessarily add like a moral weight to it just because something has the mechanism built in to avoid you know, some sort of negative stimuli. I don't know if that suddenly grants it any kind of like moral I guess moral right to exist. I guess I don't know, something along those lines.
Okay. I don't know how far like you take this. Like, are you really saying that it's perfectly fine to skin animals alive?
Yeah, yeah, I would.
Really?
Here's the big fuck up with meat eaters, and this is why I think most meat eaters are really fucked. And I understand. I think we're kind of going down the emotional appeal route, but I think that when it comes to animal rights, I think it's either everything or nothing. And I'm very much, obviously, since I'm making the argument from the meat eater point of view, I have to stand on the everything side. I don't think that if you are a meat eater, if you're watching this debate as a meat eater, I think it's really stupid to try and draw a distinction between like, well, I think that it's okay to massively harvest and torture and eat tons of animals, but I don't think that like bullfighting or skinning animals is okay. Like this is a bad thing. So I'm going to sit on the end of pretty much any treatment towards animals is permissible because I don't consider them as having any of the rights that humans do, would be my point of view.
Okay. So like the problem I have with this is you're okay. This is strange. So you don't actually, it seems like this is a very nihilist perspective. You're basically saying,
Yeah, to some extent, sure.
like you're basically saying it doesn't matter who you harm, how, like for what reason. It's basically like you're saying morals just don't exist.
Well, unless you're capable of reciprocating, right? The social contract is kind of what I construct everything off of, right?
Okay.
So if they are capable of that, then you extend to them the same rights that you would extend to yourself, or demand for yourself, rather.
I don't understand how that is the only determining factor that would make something either like immoral or moral. Like, why don't you take the outcome of the situation into account? Like, okay, you don't have to kill and eat animals. Like, you can just eat plants. So you do recognize that animals are sentient beings that can experience pain and suffering. Like, why don't you recognize that, okay, even though these animals can't reciprocate rights and, you know, agree to a social contract, I'm just causing unnecessary suffering and death to these animals that would rather not suffer and have a will to live. Like, why don't you recognize that as something important?
Okay, so to kind of break this down point by point. So for the first one, in terms of, I never look at like what you have to do or don't have to do, right? There are a lot of things that you do that you don't necessarily have to do, right? We don't have to be engaging in a conversation, right now online. We don't have to play video games or have to do what a million other things we do, right? So I don't really consider those to be, I guess, like arguments against something. In terms of the animals are sentient beings, so sentience is a trait that in and of itself I just don't see much value in. I mean, I don't know how you can necessarily quantify that or what its relevance really is, to regarding whether or not or how you should treat something, right? Like a murderer or somebody else might be sentient, but that doesn't really mean anything to me in regards to whether or not I should respect their right to life. And then when you talk about like unnecessary suffering of death for animals and whatnot, I mean, we're kind of circular at this point to where I would say that I would need a compelling reason to believe why animals should have some kind of right to exist. Like, what is it? What is the compelling defining thing that makes it so that I should look at an animal and go, okay, well, this is something that is worthy of protection, worthy of some sort of right being extended to it, aside from like the sentience thing, I guess, is the argument that doesn't necessarily.
Well, like, do you just like, are you actually a sociopath?
maybe,
Not like
a
seriously,
little bit.
like
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's relevant to the conversation.
no. Well, I think it kind of is.
Okay.
Like most people have empathy, and they can understand that I don't like it when I get hurt, or I wouldn't want to be killed. And since these animals are also sentient, like obviously they don't have the same cognitive ability that we do, and they're not sentient to the extent we are. They still have a will to live, similar to us, and they feel pain similar to us, like even emotional pain. Like if you rip a baby cow away from its mother, like they both, it's insanely stressful for both the mother and the baby cow. So like knowing that, why would you be perfectly fine with just causing that harm to another living being?
So, so again, in breaking all of these down, I'm trying to do this like as rationally as possible. So I'm trying to avoid the emotional arguments here. When you talk about how like I don't like it when I'm killed, since these animals are also sentient, etc. Like this is, I think this kind of plays into my end where it's like I don't like to be killed, and I don't want to be killed or raped or hurt or whatever. And because of that, I extend that right to other people who can also understand and accept that. So I don't kill my neighbor or steal his shit or kill his children or whatever because I don't want him stealing my shit, killing me, or killing my children, right? I can engage in that contract with him. He understands it. I understand it. And then all of society is kind of built on this reciprocation. If I venture into a forest and there's like a, like a hungry fucking bear or some shit, I can respect him and his right to life and not hurt his children all I want. But if he's hungry and he sees me, I'm just a fucking meal to him. He'll never, ever, ever have that same respect for me.
Right. Well, I don't see why that matters. Like you can just choose, I don't know, not to walk into the forest and walk into a bear's territory and not kill it.
Yeah, I mean, I could choose that, or I could choose to walk into the forest and kill it. I just don't see a strong moral compulsion one way or the other. And if killing it or whatever brings me entertainment or joy or food or whatever, or even just entertainment, right? Because let's be real, you don't really need to eat me to survive, right? So we'll just say entertainment. I would need a compelling reason not to entertain myself. And since I don't have a strong argument for respecting the life of a bear any more than the life of a tree or a stalk of corn or whatever, I just wouldn't see a compelling reason not to do it.
Okay, so you're saying that your own personal enjoyment is worth more than any animal's life?
Yeah.
Okay. This is
much the same way that it would be worth more than the life of like a tree or a plant or whatever. Not in the same. No, I wouldn't make the argument like you should be able to set fields ablaze or whatever, because there are kind of other negative things that can happen as well. But
okay, the problem I'm seeing here is like you're basically saying, well, sentience, like the ability to feel pain and suffering, that doesn't matter, and you just throw away that as any kind of value. But it's almost as if you're arbitrarily placing a value on a social contract.
So again, things become like a little bit axiomatic here, where we're kind of, I'm assuming something to be true because it is. Like the reason why I harp on the social contract is because I think that you can build an entire civilization of that, of perfectly functioning human beings that function and exist and live with each other peacefully because of that social contract. So I guess you could argue that that might be arbitrary, but then I turn around and I ask you, like, how do you draw a distinction between, you know, plants versus animals, or you know, especially lower animals versus more complicated plants? Like, I feel like your distinctions become as arbitrary as mine. Whereas at least for the social contract, I can point to, well, I can build society and civilization around this. So that's kind of how I look at the social contract, as being my way of constructing everything, you know?
Well, it's not like I don't understand that there's sort of a hierarchy of life. I mean, a human life, I'd say, is more important than a fish's life.
Why?
But well, because we have a higher cognitive ability, we live longer, we're more sentient, we have a higher emotional range. Like, just the impact on the world that we can have is just greater than a fish. So
looking at that real quick, just to kind of draw into there. So one thing that I got uncomfortable with when people make certain arguments is when you start to get into like really gray, arbitrary areas. When you say things like we are more intelligent or have more emotional intelligence, why do you reach a certain level where all of a sudden that emotional or intellectual intelligence makes you worthy of life? Well, like what level? How does that magically, like, what threshold do you cross that does that?
well, I think it's reasonable to say that if we can recognize that a creature is sentient and has, or at least has some level of sentience and can experience pain and suffering, I think to some extent it has a right to life. But like, where I draw the line is like, okay, what is the most reasonable way for me to exist in the world while causing the least amount of suffering or death possible, within reason? So, like, I'm not going to just go abandon civilization and live out in the woods just so that I can, like, avoid, I don't know, buying something on Amazon and then, like, the plane that it was shipped on hitting a bird. Like, I think that's unreasonable, but like, it's like, I can just very easily choose not to consume animal products. Like, I can very easily choose not to buy meat from the grocery store. Like, it's just a very reasonable, common sense situation where I don't have to support that sort of pain, suffering, and death, and I can live quite comfortably. Now, if insects were to, like, infest my apartment, like termites, cockroaches, or something, I can recognize that they're sentient to a very limited extent, but they're interfering with my well-being, and I think it's fine in that situation to exterminate those insects who, you know, are actually affecting my well-being. Like, what you're doing here is you're basically throwing out like every animal in every situation, saying none of that shit matters because social contract, I only care about people. Whereas I think I have a much more common sense approach, and like, I'm just taking context into account where, okay, like, I can recognize that most animals are sentient, they can experience pain and suffering, and I'll just do whatever I reasonably can to eliminate or reduce their pain and suffering. But, you know, in some situations, you have to have a certain standard of well-being, and you have to, like, exterminate cockroaches sometimes.
Damn.
Yeah, like, basically what I want to say, the main problem I have with you is you're saying, like, instead of saying like let's just do a common sense thing and try to reduce suffering, you're just saying, okay, well, it's either all or nothing. If we can't eliminate all suffering, then just fuck them all. Like, that's what I'm getting from you.
So to speak to this, I don't believe in like reducing suffering of animals, because I'm trying to make an argument that what I see as being is the most morally consistent argument. If your goal is to reduce the suffering of animals, then the only reason you would be interested in that is because you think that the suffering of animals is something that should be avoided. If you think the suffering of animals should be avoided, then I don't think there is any good argument that you can make in favor of eating meat. I think it makes you a hypocrite at that point, because it's very possible to live off of a diet that involves no animal products whatsoever. So I don't see how you could possibly be in favor of eating meat if you're also in favor of reducing suffering, right? If you've already admitted that killing animals for food is wrong, how can you ever be in favor of it, right? So this is why my approach seems really all or nothing, because I'm trying to be as consistent on this point as possible. And again, like, if you start to say things like, well, I don't think we should, you know, like, torture animals, like skin an animal, like, that's not okay. So, well, why don't you think that's okay? Why is it that that's not okay, but killing an animal for food when you don't need to is okay, right? That seems really hypocritical to me.
Right. Just just to be clear, so are you saying animals should have no rights at all? And like the current animal rights policies we have with regards to like humane slaughter, like we do have humane slaughter laws where
Yep.
the animal has to be stunned before it gets its throat slit open. Like cruelty to pets, like you can't abuse your dog. Like you think all of those rights just that we give to animals shouldn't exist?
Yeah, I think they're absurd. I think they're absurdly hypocritical. I think it would be similar to having like ethical treatments of slaves. Like we would never, ever, ever, ever accept these arguments for people. Why do we accept them for animals? What do you mean?
Well, if you just read the Bible, like there is ethical treatment of slaves. Like,
well, sure. I'm not religious. I'm sorry.
I know, but I'm not talking about this from a religious perspective.
Yeah, no.
I'm just
in the
saying
past, there might
have had these laws.
For what we decide right now. Yeah, and I'm sure there were probably laws on how you should treat slaves in the 1800s and whatnot. But like, I'm not. But this kind of morality isn't something that I engage in, right? And today, with our current understanding of ethics, like nobody would be okay with saying like, okay, well, I have a slave. You know, I have slaves that are humans and everything, but I treat them really nicely. You know, I don't torture them or anything. So that's kind of cool, right? Well, people go like, well, no, the fuck, that's slavery. That's fucked up. That's wrong, right? I think it's really bizarre that we live in a world where you can get in trouble for kicking your dog. Like there's laws against that kind of animal cruelty. But, we lock up chickens and shit in coops for, their entire fucking lives, shitting out eggs and whatnot for human consumption. Like that seems really hypocritical to me.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So this is why I say, like, I think most meat eaters are very fucking hypocritical, or people will cry because of some fucking lion that gets shot, an ocean away. And then they go down to the store and they buy, a ton of fucking ribeyes and shit for dinner tonight. Like that seems really morally inconsistent to me.
It is morally inconsistent and it's totally hypocritical. I agree with you. But again, there's this all or nothing sort of mentality that you have where, like, why don't you, even if it is hypocritical, like, why don't you just see this as, okay, it's hypocritical, but maybe this is a step towards something better. Like, if we can give rights to dogs to, like, make sure, like, it's illegal to abuse your dog, like, beat the shit out of them. Like, why isn't that, okay, let's build upon this. Let's extend that to other animals, or let's make...
For me personally, that's not something I would ever build upon. That's a decision for me. If I decided at one point that animals, we'll say with sentience is kind of your argument, with sentience or a certain level of metacognizance or intelligence or whatever, are worthy of protection, that's an all or nothing thing. That's like okay, well, I've made this decision. I'm a vegan because I'm not going to sit here and protect the rights of some animals and then fucking massively slaughter and eat other ones. It's like an insanely hypocritical. Like I could never feel like I'm being a moral or ethical person. That it just feels so inconsistent to me.
Okay.
Right. And I imagine, like, as a vegan, like, I'm sure you see that too. Like, that has to be really irritating when you see somebody like loving and petting their dog and cat and they think they're so cool. And then they run and they eat like a giant fucking steak and shrimp dinner or something. Like, that has to be like hypocritical as fuck, right?
Well, totally. Okay. The thing here too, like, you don't think it's sort of a better perspective to have where, okay, let's give rights to, even if we're not planning on building upon it, like, let's give rights to dogs or cats or, pets where it's not, we, draw a line in the sand. It's illegal to abuse them. Don't you think that's sort of a better sort of moral or legal structure to have than just say, fuck all animals, just do whatever the hell we want to them?
Well, so I would have to ask why. I mean, we already own animals are essentially, and I know a lot of people get mad, but animals are really slaves, right? That's what they are. We lock them up in our house. We don't let them roam anywhere. We keep them inside. We usually feed them shitty diets of fake food. And then we force them to stay around to entertain ourselves, right? They stay because we feed them, right? Like,
well, again, like, are you actually saying that causing less harm to animals isn't a benefit to anyone?
Correct.
Even to them.
Well, I mean, maybe to them, but I'm not concerned with them, right? I think that it sounds extreme, but I think this is the only reasonable stance to take. Again, because if you start to make concessions that, well, maybe we shouldn't be mean to animals, then it's like, okay, well, why are you eating them, right? I don't think you can sit in a gray area here. I think it has to be all or nothing. For the record, I don't like vegetarians either because I think that sits on a really weird line. Like, I don't know how you can make a decision to be a vegetarian and not just be a vegan. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Like, the thing with the social contract argument you're making too, have you ever owned any pets?
Yeah, I have a cat right now.
Okay, maybe I think cats will eat your corpse as soon as you die. They don't really give much of a shit about you. Yeah, but
I'm a dog person. I've had dogs in the past.
Yeah, like if you've ever owned a dog, they really grow to love you. You haven't actually noticed that?
I mean, like, I feel like this is getting into more kind of emotional
Well,
territory.
no,
I
no, no.
mean,
It's not really emotional because they are sort of forming a social contract with you because, a wild feral dog, if like they'll just rip you to pieces.
mhm.
But your own, family pet, like your pet dog, they really grow to love you, and they'd never do that to you. You don't really consider that as some sort of social contract. Like, obviously, it's not to the same extent a human will form a social contract with you, but
I
you
mean,
don't.
at the risk of sounding colder than the fucking North Pole, like, do they grow to love you? I mean, to some extent, sure. But anytime you keep an animal around and you provide it with enough food and shelter and you hang out with it, like, it will begin to foster these feelings, right? Like, I mean, you could get a
Well, you
guinea.
could make that same argument with human children. Like, if you don't fucking take care of them, they'll grow to hate you.
Well,
Like,
sure, but human
obviously.
children can grow to respect the social contract, right? Which was kind of my central axiom for why I respect humans and not animals, right? Even for
Well,
children that aren't currently capable of respecting social contract, they have the intelligence to grow to respect it.
well, again, like if you don't if you don't treat a child well, like if you don't take care of it, don't feed it, it's
Mhm.
just going to grow to like totally resent you. And if a kid is brought up in that sort of environment, you really think they're going to grow up to respect social contracts? Like, these are the type of kids who become insane fucking psychopaths.
Sure. I mean, I would consider that to be a fault of the parent, but I would also agree with you as well. Again, if somebody comes up to me on the street and say I have an ability to flash and look at his entire life, and I see that for whatever due to years of neglect and abuse, he's grown up to not be a respectful member of society, that doesn't change my stance on him. If I think he's going to hurt me or fuck with my shit, then you take appropriate action. You wouldn't extend to him the same respects and rights or whatever that you would another more reciprocating human being.
Right. But the issue here is, so do you like the issue I have here is it seems like you're sort of ignoring the fact that animals like can to some extent have sort of a social contract with you. Like, even if you think, okay, it's not real love, they're just like the only reason they like you is because you fed them and gave them a warm home and everything.
Mhm.
Don't you think just the fact that they'd sort of return the favor to you, like be affectionate towards you, not bite you because you give affection to them, like you don't think that gives them any sort of right to any kind of respect?
Not particularly. No, I don't think that the fact that something is grateful that you feed it, I don't think necessarily entitles you to the same rights that humans have, or any level of rights that would be similar to a human.
Okay, so like even if like so you just think anyone should be able to like torture their dog to death?
Pretty much, yeah, because it's a possession, and you don't extend the same rights to the animal that you would to humans. Yeah.
Okay, and if your next door neighbor, if you found out that your next door neighbor buys dogs, tortures them to death, like skins them alive, you wouldn't think that person should be locked up?
Well, I mean, I might for a host of other reasons, but
Well, exactly. Well, exactly.
But this gets into more like because typically people that like murder or torture animals have severe empathy issues. I think it's natural for human beings to there's a word I'm looking for, anthropomorphize. There's a word I'm looking for where you assign human traits to animals because some of the ways they act are superficially similar to humans. So if somebody's like torturing animals on the daily, there's probably something fucked with them mentally. But again, like to the argument that you just said, like, would you be uncomfortable? And
Okay.
I know like everybody in your chat is like, I would be uncomfortable if there was a guy torturing animals and shit next door to me. People will say that, and even meat eaters will say that, but then they will go and they will buy food that they don't know how those cows are brought up. They don't know how those chickens are brought up. Some of those farms are fucking horrible places, and they don't give a fuck that they're stuck on their feet all day or injected full of hormones or whatever, and they'll eat them. They don't really care. So I feel like this is more like an emotional argument that meat eaters are inconsistent on.
Okay. I'm getting the feeling that you're either not being totally genuine with what you're saying, like you don't actually believe what you're saying, or you may just actually be a sociopath.
This is kind of this is kind of the problem. So
Well,
with
can I
animals,
can I just
yeah,
ask
go
you
ahead.
something? Can I just
Yeah, go,
ask you
go.
something?
Mhm.
Do you think you have it in you to torture a dog? Like, would you feel ashamed of yourself? Would you like even just kill a dog? Like, do you think you have it in you to do that to an animal?
Um, I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. I guess if I had to, I don't know. I've never really thought about it before.
Have you ever killed an animal before?
No, I don't. I enjoy shooting and everything too, but I don't really like hunting. I don't think any of that is very entertaining to me.
Like, okay, so you've actually never killed an animal before. Like I'm sure we've all killed spiders or something,
Yeah,
but
maybe I've like ran over. I mean, I slow down if I see like a bunny crossing the road or whatever.
well,
Like I
why
don't get
is that?
enjoyment because I don't get enjoyment out of killing animals and shit. Is not
Okay,
something that.
well, if like I think that's telling a bit because again, this makes me feel like you're not actually being genuine with what you're saying because if you're saying who gives a fuck what happens to any animals, they can't reciprocate rights. Well, why would you slow down when you see like a rabbit or a bird or a squirrel on the road?
So I feel like you have to be careful when you go down this road because you can very easily find people who do get like, what if I were to tell you, well, actually, yes, I love hunting. It's actually really enjoyable for me to hunt. Like there's something beautiful about seeing the life flicker away from an animal's eyes or something, right? Like if I were to answer like this, then you kind of like run into a dead end. For me personally, I just don't, I'm not a big, like, I don't like killing things at all. It's just not something that's very entertaining to me. That doesn't mean I'm assigning like a moral weight to it. If I had a friend that was a hunter or whatever, I wouldn't think less of them, you know. It's just for me personally, it's just not something that I enjoy at all. But when you run down the emotional or quote unquote common sense arguments, you have to be careful because, you know, a lot of the same people, I'm going to pull the same thing you did to no bullshit, right? A lot of the same people would say the same thing about black people for slavery, right? Like, well, you know, are they really human? You know, do they really feel the same way that we feel? Like, I mean, just look at them, common sense, you know, like, I think that it's really, you have to be really careful going down those emotional routes. I seem like I'm being ungenuine because I'm trying to be as like rigidly logical as possible, but I'm not trying to give you the impression that I will like go outside and look for dogs to skin because I have nothing better to do with my time.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Like when we create laws like don't murder, don't rape, don't steal, I don't think most people think of it in the way you're thinking of it.
For
like
sure, I agree.
You're basically it's just pure cold hard logic like okay, what's the best most efficient way we can exist in society and, you know, be as productive as possible. Like most people don't see it that way. Most people see it in a very emotional empathetic sort of way. Like
I agree.
do I want to be killed? No, like it's basically a golden rule sort of thing. Don't treat others the way you wouldn't want to be treated. That like, and again, I think you do think in that sort of way, and I just think you're trying to be as logically consistent as possible so that you can justify eating meat without being an absolute hypocrite. Because again, you were saying if you're driving a car and you see a rabbit crossing the road or say like a squirrel or a dog or whatever, you slow down and try to avoid running it over. Like, why would you inconvenience yourself like that? Like,
Well,
why
I
don't
mean,
you
if I
just
saw
go?
like a tumbleweed rolling across the road, I'd probably slow down too because I don't want to like fuck my tire or my car up or something. I mean, I don't think that that's like a good litmus test for like what are your actual like moral foundations if you don't, you know, run over an animal and cause it to explode on the road and fuck your tire and your car up. Like, well, like, I mean, I don't think that's like the way to. I don't think that's a good way to like attack my.
Okay, assuming, let's say you're driving a tank, okay, and you saw like I don't know, bunny or a squirrel or something crossing the road. Would you slow down to not run over that animal?
If I'm driving a tank, why am I driving a tank? If we're in like a war zone, I'm probably just fucking going through. Like I don't.
Well, what I'm trying like what the point I'm trying to make, I'm just trying to figure out whether or not you actually do on some level care about animals or if you're actually being genuine because it's actually starting to seem like you're not being totally genuine with me here. Because like you admit that you're not really interested in just running over animals. You would sort of inconvenience yourself a little bit to avoid causing, you know, suffering and death.
But I will, but it's not to avoid suffering and death. I don't really care. I just wouldn't do it because I don't feel like running over an animal. I wouldn't run over anything. I think you're reading a little bit too much into it. Like I'm not like avoiding it because like I'm thinking like the bunny is running home to its children or something.
Well, if you knew that it couldn't possibly harm the vehicle you're in or like inconvenience you in any way, like running the thing over, it wouldn't fuck up your tires or something, like driving a tank, would you actually bulldoze over a rabbit or a squirrel or anything that's on the road?
I mean, I don't like littering or fucking up like the environment either. Like I don't like throwing shit around. I mean, but let's assume that I didn't care about any of that. Let's assume I didn't care how the road looked or whatever. There was a magical street cleaner at the end of the day. Then yeah, I guess I would. It wouldn't really bother me.
You would. You just
Yeah.
run over an animal, even though
Yeah.
like if you just slow down a little bit, it could just wander off and then it'd be
Correct.
perfectly fine.
Correct. And this is and again and I know I understand that like it sounds like I'm being really extreme, but I agree with you that I consider 99.99999% of meat eaters to be complete and total fucking hypocrites. So I'm giving you what I believe to be the most morally and logically consistent platform possible. I'm not going to sit here and defend the rights of some animals and then say that we should eat meat. I don't think that position is defensible. And I will tear apart any meat eater that wants to talk about, well, you should respect bunnies or deer or dogs or cats, but then on the other hand say also I eat fucking tons of chickens and steak all the time. Like I don't think that's a legitimate argument. I think that's totally unfounded and completely hypocritical, in my opinion.
Okay. It's an interesting perspective. I don't think I've actually met anyone who gave this sort of argument before, but what I'm still not really like, I still don't entirely understand your position here because again, it's like you're just arbitrarily placing ultimate value on social contract, but you're ignoring like actual empathy, which I think does matter, like the actual outcome of your actions, how this affects other beings. Like I don't understand why that doesn't matter to you at all.
So you phrase this as I put arbitrary value on social contract while ignoring empathy. But my argument would be I think I've reasonably defended the importance of social contract, and I would argue that you place arbitrary value on empathy. Like, why is your defense of empathy less arbitrary than my defense of social contract? Like, I feel like I've rationalized social contract. Can you tell me why you feel empathy is a really important basis to build your moral system around?
Well, because it actually considers outcome, whereas yours doesn't. It's
Well, what do you mean by that? Mine considers outcome. It's the outcome of how people function in society, right? I don't kill you, so you don't kill me. The
right.
golden
Well,
rule reciprocation.
it's entirely anthropocentric. Like, why can't we extend empathy towards animals at all? And again, this really does come back around to humans, because if we're not going to extend empathy to animals, like, you really think that people who just torture and kill dogs for fun, you don't think there should be some sort of social contract where you'd actually be breaking a social contract with another human? Like, you don't think there should be any legal consequences to that? Because obviously somebody who do that is seriously fucked up. And I think there should be some legal consequences to doing that. Like, outside of like me just saying, oh shit, you harmed animals. It's like, no, this person's fucking dangerous. There's something wrong with them. And like, it's a danger to humans as well, not just animals. Like, who the fuck would torture and kill a dog? Like, who would skin a dog alive?
Yeah, but like you kind of just answered that in and of itself. Like if I was worried about somebody, like torturing and killing dogs, it's not because they're killing dogs, it's because they represent a threat to humans as well, right? I wouldn't be concerned about the animal killing.
Well, I think both of it is important. I think,
well, of course, because you're a vegan. I mean, yeah, I understand.
Well, I think most, not even just because I'm vegan. Like, really, your perspective is incredibly rare. I don't think I've ever met anyone who is using the same sort of logic and argument you're making. So
yeah, I agree. Again, I can't stress enough how much I hate the average person that eats meat, like a dumb fuck, like no bullshit, trying to justify their meat eating. Like, I do believe it has to be all or nothing.
Like, you're literally talking about 99% of people who agree with me, and like that includes non-vegans. Like, the only people who wouldn't are sociopaths or people who are like just being dishonest, sort of like no bullshit.
Sure. Well, I don't think no bullshit is dishonest. I think he's just very stupid.
Like, he is pretty dishonest, but I don't think he's taken it as far as you did. He did agree that needless suffering is bad. Yeah.
So I guess if I can kind of back this up, I think there's kind of there's one central point that we kind of come to, that we kind of gotten past. And I think it has to do with, why do we value the sentience of animals? Why is that something? Because this is ultimately what separates the animals from plants for you, right? So I think that's kind of what the whole central thing is. Like, is the sentience of animals something to be valued? And if so, why?
Well, like, it really comes down to empathy. Like, I can understand that another being wants to live. I can understand that it can feel pain and suffering. Like, why would I want to cause pain and suffering to that animal when I wouldn't want that for myself?
Well, so like the
And
desire to live and all of that, like these are things that are just necessary functions of a biological organism, right? There is no
right.
biological thing that is not going to want to live because it wouldn't
Well,
exist.
just because it's biological, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter.
For sure, but
Like,
just
okay,
because
like,
no,
oh,
I would agree with you there. I would say it's neutral, but just because it's biological doesn't mean it matters
well,
either.
you know what? Like, you could argue that the social contracts that human beings make, it's sort of biologically wired in us.
Yep,
You could argue that. Like,
for
does that
sure.
make it not matter?
Well, so I would say it does matter because you're human, right? It's intrinsic to you as a being, right? The social contract and the existence of civilization all revolves around you as a human. Whatever animals think or feel is not really relevant to you as a human or to human civilization. So because you are human, right? That's like that hard line in the sand that I can draw. That's why I try to stay away from like arbitrary definitions. Like because you are human and because you are interested in the existence of other humans, because you want them to be interested in your existence as a human, right? That's where the social contract comes from.
Okay. I don't think we're going to get much further here because we're
Mhm.
sort of arguing in circles. But
Sure.
just to sort of wrap things up, I just have a few like other questions.
Yeah.
Um, so would you say it's like if the entire world could go vegan, we'd eliminate animal agriculture, would you say that's a better way of life than, what we're doing now?
I mean, there are other arguments you could start to dip into.
Well, and
I'm
that's what I want to
pretty,
get into later, like
yeah.
health and environment. But like,
So
I
like,
mean, from a moral perspective, do you like,
no,
would you
I would
say
have to say,
causing less harm
I
would,
would have to say no. I would have to say no to that because if I
you're,
say yes to that and I still eat meat, I'm essentially being a hypocrite, right? I don't think you can like skirt that line there. If I genuinely believed that animal suffering was wrong, then that would compel me to be a vegan. I couldn't go and eat meat and then on the other hand say I wish that we stopped eating meat. Like this doesn't make any sense.
okay, so you're basically saying you're completely neutral and indifferent with respect to like the morality of causing animal suffering and death in the animal agriculture industry or choosing to go vegan and not causing that suffering and death. Like it literally makes no difference to you.
Correct.
Okay. Um, all right. I guess let's talk about how this affects people then, because I think this will be a little more interesting to you. Like, let's talk about like health,
Sure.
how the
So
animal agriculture industry affects health.
these probably won't be as interesting. So when you talk about veganism, I think that the strongest arguments that you can make in favor of veganism are the moral ones. I think that everything else gets a lot more wishy-washy because when you're going to start talking about things like environment or health, people already make suboptimal decisions in these regards anyway, even being meat eaters. I don't know how you morally compel somebody to choose a more optimal path for life. We could start, I guess, with the health reasons if you want. But
Well, the thing is, if we could just eliminate the animal agriculture industry,
Mhm.
like the vast majority of people, they wouldn't have access to meat, dairy, and eggs.
Mhm.
I guess people could still hunt, but it, it it wouldn't support the majority of people. Like the majority of people wouldn't have any access to animal products.
Sure.
Um, like unless everyone just starts eating like a tremendous amount of junk food like Oreos and vegan ice cream and vegan donuts, potato chips, like assuming that most people follow like primarily a whole foods vegan diet, like they switch steak out for lentils and potatoes and stuff like that,
Mhm.
you'd greatly improve the health of the population. Like you'd at least be cutting heart disease in half.
Mhm.
So like you don't see that as a benefit?
So, I mean, it definitely is a benefit, but any argument that you can make towards getting rid of meat, I could probably make 10 times over getting rid of sugar, right? Sugar is a cancer in Western diet. It's one of the worst fucking things that I think has happened to us as a species. You would improve everybody's quality of life, their diets immensely by trying to axe out as much sugar. We have sugar in fucking everything these days. But just because I can say that cutting sugars would make us healthier, I don't know if that makes it a moral imperative to do so, right? You get similar arguments you can make for exercise as well, right? Getting out and running every day, even if you don't lift or whatever, is going to improve your health immensely. But I don't know if that makes it like a moral imperative to do so.
Like I think people should have freedom of choice. Like I don't think anybody should be forced to live a healthy lifestyle if they don't want to. But like again, you're obviously not going to agree with this because you literally do not give a shit about reducing animal suffering. But
Yeah.
like that's always the point I make. Like we could improve health And even if you don't care about health, you'd still be saving animals.
Yeah.
Or
So
at
again,
least,
we're kind
yeah,
of running back to the moral argument, which I think is the
right.
strongest. And I think it's the only one that's really relevant because there's a million things that we can do that would make our well, cars are something. Even the United States, there's
Well,
a lot of people that could get by driving bikes or riding bikes without having to get a car. A lot more people could do it, but they don't. And we were killing the environment and everything, and animals as well, right?
well,
And protection, all that.
the thing is, like, again, this is a very all or nothing sort of approach you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really hard for me to wrap my head around how you can just flat out say, it literally makes no difference if you know, kill a billion, like 50 billion animals each year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you could choose to not kill over 50 billion animals each year and improve the health of the population, even if all the other, you know, lifestyle factors like eating sugar, not exercising enough, even if you can't do anything about that, like, how is that not a huge benefit to cut out animal product consumption, even if people still aren't going to live like totally optimal lives? That would still reduce chronic disease and death in the human population, which, like, I think you would agree that is a benefit, and you would be saving a tremendous amount of animals from like horrible suffering and death.
Yeah, so I mean, so again, because if we're disregarding the moral arguments and we get rid of the saving animals from death part, what you're essentially asking me is, should we axe an entire industry to improve the health of some people? And these go into like kind of these fundamental questions of freedom of choice and whatnot, right? Should you have the choice to drink alcohol? Should you have the choice to smoke cigarettes? Should you have the choice to lead an unhealthy life? I think you probably should, and at least at this point in society, that's the decision that we've made. If we decide that, you know, like maybe people shouldn't be left to those decisions on can you act in ways that are suboptimal to your health, then in that case I would probably agree, like, yeah, maybe axing animal agriculture is probably a good idea, or at least severely curtailing it. But it doesn't seem like that's how we make any decision in society. Like, should everybody be compelled to run, 1 mile a day? Should everybody be compelled to bike a certain amount? Like, none of these are like moral imperatives
Well,
that we place on people. Sorry.
well, the thing is, like, you're talking about personal rights. This
Mhm.
is more about like corporate and business rights.
What do you
Like,
mean by that?
well, you're not necessarily taking away people's right to eat meat. Like, they could still shoot a squirrel, say, or go hunting,
Mhm.
but you'd prevent it from being a business. Like nobody can actually profit off of it. Start, like, you know, a farm or sell meat. You don't think that would be a good thing?
Well, you're kind of doing the same thing, just one step removed, right? That would be like saying, like, I'm not going to make guns illegal, but I am going to make it illegal to sell a gun. Now, if people want to go into the back and get a smith or a forge and, start harvesting or start crafting their own weapons and forging their own weapons, that's fine. I'm not making it illegal, but I'm going to make, like, I think that you kind of effectively do the same thing, right? You're cutting off access for tons of people to ever have access to this. I think it's more or less the same thing. I don't think the distinction matters much.
Okay. Like, yeah, again, uh, you're either just an actual sociopath, or like, I'm still getting the feeling that you're kind of being dishonest with me.
I'm
Like,
not. I'm really not. Someone in your chat said, "Would I rather be? I would rather be a sociopath than a hypocrite. I really would. Like, I do a lot of these kinds of discussions, and I put a fair amount of thought into this. And like I said, I really do think that veganism, especially with the advent of like lab grown meat, will probably be a thing in like 50 years. I'm still kind of on the fence about it, but I'm really trying to be as morally consistent as possible, because on all of
and
the things that you're talking about, like, meat eaters are very, very hypocritical about it. And I'm not going to jump and defend like some animals and not all of them. It doesn't make sense to me. Sorry, go ahead.
and from a moral perspective, you don't see any benefit to eating lab grown meat compared to raising meat in agriculture, and, you know, obviously causing suffering to animals and then killing them.
Well, again, so I don't have a compelling reason to believe that I should be concerned with the suffering of animals. Right. That's the thing that I'm missing. It is that if that thing was there and I could plug that in, then everything else would fall in line to point towards veganism, right? If you believe that the suffering of animals is something that should be avoided, but I don't, and I don't have a compelling argument for why it should be.
Okay, so you're saying suffering and quality of life doesn't matter, it because it doesn't affect you?
No, for animals, because it's just not something we're concerned with. We would
Well,
never
that
go
you're
into like, oh well, yeah, well, sure, that I'm concerned with, yeah, as a human. Right, we would never
well,
go into like a forest or a rainforest or some shit and try to find animals and hire their quality of life or protect them from other predators or anything like that. We would never be concerned with this kind of a thing, right?
Well, again, it seems like the only reason you're not concerned with it is just because it doesn't affect you.
To some extent, yeah, in a roundabout way, sure. The self-interested thing, the way that the social contract works, is ultimately about selfishness, right? We engage in social contract with others so that they engage in it with us, right?
Right. So, like, you're actually suggesting that you're basically saying like even quality of life doesn't matter
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
it personally affects you.
Well, or another human, yeah.
Well, again, like you said, social contracts really, like, it's the only reason you're in a social contract to begin with is ultimately to benefit yourself.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so if you could wave a magic wand to like stop human suffering, would you do it?
Um,
It-
yeah, for sure.
okay, well, why wouldn't you do that for animals?
Because
Like,
because
again,
I have no compelling
well,
reason to care about animals.
well, no. Like, again, like you don't have any compelling reason to prevent the suffering of humans, really, outside of like social contract, just so it doesn't happen to you. But I'm saying, if you were like a god and you were
Hmm.
just observing this,
Hmm.
you would, and suffering of humans, like if you could just wave a magic wand and just stop all people from suffering, why wouldn't you just do that to animals? Like, it seems like you do understand empathy, like you do sympathize with people when they're suffering. Why don't you just sympathize with animals?
So if there was a God being, what will give you the perfect possible universe? A God being offers you the decision to come up and say, or to acknowledge, I want to end the suffering of all human beings, right? I would say, I would go up and I would say, yes, I do. And I would hope that any other human being, because of the social contract, would engage in a similar deal with any kind of omnipotent being. Now, if a deer were to approach a God figure with that decision, I think the deer would probably just take a shit and walk off, or a bear, or a dolphin, or any other kind of animal, because I don't think they
Well,
have the same kind of,
it doesn't have the cognitive ability to
yeah,
understand what's going on.
exactly. So
They
this is
don't
kind of
even
where
have language.
yeah. So that, well, and I'm not even saying they would have to say it, but I'm just saying like these are beings that can't even conceptualize right society. So yeah, I would be interested in ending all human suffering. I would hope that every human is interested in ending all human suffering, but I don't think that any animal is concerned with ending any human suffering.
Well, like, again, they're just, they don't have the intelligence we do, so it's hard for them to even imagine this. But they do have empathy to some extent.
Well,
Like,
everything has empathy. It's a biological process that helps us get along with
well,
family,
right,
right?
but like I'm saying, just because these animals like can't form a social contract with you and maybe don't necessarily care about you, like you can still understand that they're living beings that can feel pain. Like, I'm just wondering why. Like, if you were a god being who could just
Uh,
wave a magic wand and stop all suffering, like, why wouldn't you do that? Like,
so
is it literally just totally indifferent to you? Like, if you could just stop all suffering, like human and animal suffering, like you just wouldn't do it to animals, but you would do it to people?
yeah, I'm not even sure how the stopping all animal suffering would work. Like, what about like the
Well,
carnivores and stuff? Like, would they not eat other animals or?
like it's a magic wand. Like, the ecosystem would still magically exist. It's a like a weird hypothetical.
Yeah,
Like
no,
what I'm
and
really trying to
I'm trying.
do.
I'm trying to give you as much leeway on the hypothetical as possible, while without missing the point of it. But like for humans, like humans could probably exist with no suffering by via agriculture, right? But like, how does a wolf? Like, are they going to start farming
Right.
or eating
Well,
plants only? Or?
what I'm basically trying to get here is I'm trying to figure out if you do actually care about people on an empathetical level, and not just because you adhere to a social contract, and the only reason you treat people with respect and dignity, and you respect their rights to to life, uh, is it just because you're trying to protect yourself,
Yeah,
or
I'm
do you
sorry. So
actually have empathy for another person?
I'm not going to lie to you about anything you ask me. I swear. So you can just ask me, like, do I care about people on an empathetical level? The answer is no. That's not where any of my morals or ethics come from. It has nothing to do with empathy for other human beings, and it has everything to do with social contract and everything that I can reason out from there. It
Okay.
has nothing to do with empathy. Yeah.
Have you ever had a girlfriend or been in a loving relationship? Like, seriously,
Believe it or not, yeah, I have somehow.
you
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
and that
But
worked out.
I don't think these I don't think this argument is going to help your
No, like, it's just very fascinating to me. Like,
sure.
I don't know.
I'm
sound
trying to
like
be
a
as
total
logically
sociopath.
consistent as possible again. I'm just empathizing that, or I'm oh god, there's a word, emphasizing. I'm sorry, I'm emphasizing that. I'm just trying to be as logically consistent as possible in this argument.
Okay. I'm kind of at a loss for what to say to you
Mm-hmm.
because like everything I come to, you're basically like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, in
Like
terms
as
of
long as it
I think
right.
that, like, from your point of view, I think that the easiest way to attack me is I think that anybody that owns and loves an animal or a pet or is concerned with the suffering of animals, like if you go to a zoo and you're sad that an animal is trapped in a cage or whatever, I think that all of these people should be vegan. I don't see how like that these are really easy positions. That's I feel like I could argue in favor of veganism very, very, very easily against the average meat eater because I don't
Okay.
see how you can possibly love some animals and think it's okay to massively harvest and slaughter others. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. You did say you own a cat and
Yeah.
you have owned dogs. So like, were these you did you buy your cat or did you
Well,
like?
my cat belongs to my girlfriend, and then my a dog
Okay.
belongs to my ex-girlfriend.
Okay, so you never actually bought an animal yourself.
Personally, no, I don't want the responsibility of taking care of one. But I
Right,
mean, I enjoy
right.
animals. Like,
Okay. All right. So like I was gonna ask, like, would you treat it any differently if, you were the one who went out and bought that animal or if you adopted it? Like would you treat it differently than how you're treating it now?
yeah, probably. I would probably take care of it a lot more. I mean, I take care.
Really?
This sounds really fucked up, but like, I bought a new car and I take care of that thing way better than I would any rental car. But I would view an animal as a possession, just like a vehicle, right, or a computer, or what any other thing like that, an instrument.
Right. Like I'm just wondering, so assuming this wasn't your girlfriend's cat, or like let's say your girlfriend died or she left you and you were left with that cat, would you treat it any differently than how you're treating it now?
Um, I imagine probably. What are you trying? Well, I don't understand what
Like
you're getting at.
I'm what I'm basically trying to ask you is like would you just lock it in a box basically?
I mean, I enjoy the cat. Like I get personal enjoyment out of it being here. If it ever became an inconvenience, then I guess maybe I would give it to the Humane Society or something. But I don't feel like a moral obligation to keep it. But I would
Why would
keep it.
you give it to the Humane Society?
I don't know, because they can give it to someone else, I guess, or they eventually put it down, I guess. But I don't have like a I
Why
don't
wouldn't
feel
you
like
just put it down yourself?
um I mean, I guess I could. I don't know. It seems like a waste of a thing.
Okay, so even if, like, say you could see the future and you knew no one would get that cat, like
Uh-huh.
maybe it's just a really ugly cat. You just
He's not
knew
ugly.
somehow. Well,
But no, I
same.
know what you mean. Yeah, say no one else would get it, then yeah, I guess I would, sure. I wouldn't have a problem putting it down.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If no one else is gonna get it, if it was just gonna sit like in the pound or whatever, and no one was ever gonna get it or whatever, then yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. This is weird fucking conversation. I didn't expect for you to come out with this.
Sure. I understand, but do you agree? You must agree that my position is the only reasonable one for a meat eater, right? Do you agree with that, or like, it drives me crazy when people try to like ride the line between liking some animals and not liking others. It seems really strange to me.
I don't know if I'd consider your position the most reasonable one.
Hmm.
It's strange. Like I would have considered the most reasonable argument would come from somebody who's just uninformed. Like there are people who genuinely believe that humans absolutely need to eat meat for health.
Okay.
And the most reasonable arguments I've seen coming from that perspective are like, okay, we do need to like drastically reduce animal agriculture. We need to eat way less meat to be more ethical. We need to raise these animals in like, an open farm and grass fed kind of situation. Like that's what I'd consider the most reasonable argument. But like those people are just uninformed.
I
Like
guess like
with you, it's weird. Like what I consider unreasonable about your argument is you literally do not give a fuck about the outcome of the situation. Like you're saying suffering doesn't matter,
mhm.
death doesn't matter. All that matters is my own personal well-being, and what determines my own personal well-being is a social contract. And since animals can't have a social contract with me, like, fuck them. I literally don't care if they suffer and die.
Sure.
Like that's what I find unreasonable.
Yeah, I understand that. So I guess I would take issue with people because these are arguments that you would never make for human beings. When you I'm sorry, when you talk about like nice ways to kind of enslave animals and then harvest their organs for food, I don't consider that to be something that we would ever accept for treatment of humans. For instance, there is no ethical argument you could provide really for slavery right now in the West, right? Well, you know, like I have slaves, but you know, they have a really nice bedroom. I give them toys, you know, every month. I provide them free internet access. They've got Wi-Fi when they're out working in the fields. Like nobody would ever accept these arguments. They would say, dude, slavery is a moral sin. Like you cannot do this. This is disgusting. You cannot enslave people. So like if a meat eater wants to say like, well, I'll eat meat and stuff if it comes from cows that are, you know, like their bellies are rubbed every day and, you know, they're grass fed and all of that. Like, okay, well, that's strange. So you are acknowledging then that torturing and killing animals is wrong, but you can kill them if you do it in certain ways. Like that seems really hypocritical to me.
Right. I do have something to say about that. Like, if you look at a religious texts, like you know the Old Testament, for instance, there's a lot of like very strange ethical rules involving slavery. And what's especially weird is that supposedly the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians for the longest time, and then when they were finally free, they allowed for slavery. So like,
yeah, but I mean, I would reject. I don't like any.
Well, just let me carry on here. And they have rules regarding like how you can keep slaves. Like, there's a very strange rule where if you beat your slave and he dies within a day or two, then you're guilty of murder. But you know, if he survives, it's fine to beat your slave if he's being disobedient. Like there's stuff like that. Like basically there are general rules around how you can treat your slave. Even though this is hypocritical, like it's very, very strange how you'd think slavery is okay, but you have to treat your slave, you know, in a certain way. Like people, even in that situation, value empathy to some extent. Like I think they're like, and I think even you'd admit there's a biological reason for empathy. Like it does help us even create these social contracts. So
yeah, I understand what you're saying. This is
so like the thing is like the problem I have here is basically you're saying empathy doesn't matter, and I think it does. I think it's like totally necessary for us to even respect social contracts.
So in looking at this, I think that you can derive a social contract using only logic. And as edgy as that sounds, right? I think that you can logically derive a social contract without needing to rely on emotions at all. The problem that I have when you kind of make this I don't want to say like an appeal to nature, but when you talk about like it's in our nature to be empathetic and emotional, I agree that that is true. But like I can point to another system that exists that's largely built out of emotion that's totally dysfunctional. The prison system in the United States is built largely around emotion, right? If you ask somebody like, what's the purpose of prison? Well, it's retribution. Or they won't say retribution. They'll say it's justice or whatever, right? But it's really revenge, right? That's what a lot of the principles of justice in the United States are more or less built around revenge, when that doesn't logically make any sense at all, right? Prisons should exist for rehabilitation. The fact that we have insanely high recidivization, I think that's the right word, rates, people that go back to jail after coming out, the 3 strikes and you're out rule, the disproportionate sentencing between black people and white people, the strange ways that we sentence people to crimes based on how much money they have for a lawyer, right? All of our kind of prison and lawyer and all of that shit, all of that is kind of built around this weird emotional construct of like, we need to get even with people that do bad things in society. And that doesn't really serve society at all. Now, we have an emotional drive to get even with people that wrong us, sure, but that doesn't contribute to a better society. The prison system in the United States sure as fuck isn't helping us at all. It's a giant money sink. It probably hurts people more than it helps them, because when you lock people up, it fucks the rest of their life up if they've got prison charges for stupid shit like weed or whatever on their record. But like, I would point to something like the prison system and say like, well, look, here's an example of us being emotional and it being fucking horrible for us.
I don't think that is an example of us being emotional. I think that's an example of us being greedy and not actually caring about empathy, because the people who are running the prison system, they're making a shit ton of money off of it. And the reason there's bullshit like 3 strike laws in Florida It's because people are profiting off of the private prison system.
But that's not true. When politicians get up and they make these arguments, now I will tell you that is what happens, right, with private prisons and shit for sure. But when politicians get up and they have to argue in favor of prisons, right, what are the arguments they always use? They're always emotionless. We need to do this for the children. When you talk about like, hey, maybe we need to have better ways of reintegrating people into society, what do they say? Oh, so you want to let murderers back out of prison? You want to let rapists come out and
well, that's what
rape
they
your daughter?
say, but that's not necessarily the intent. Like
It might not
that's
be
not actually the intention in their speech.
That's the boat that it kind of sails on. That's how it's sold to people in society, is emotionally, right? Like these are people kind of manipulating your emotions. So it's just kind of like my general argument for like, I don't think that trusting your emotions is a good way to decide, you know, like why did we go to Iraq and Afghanistan? Because we were ready to blame anybody in the world, you know, for what happened on 9/11. That was a very emotional decision to go overseas and to enter that 10-year war, you know. Or occupation so much, right? So I don't think that like an appeal to emotion is a good way to decide what our system of values or ethics should be.
Well, it's not an appeal to emotion. I'm just saying like emotions do matter to some extent. Like our empathy does matter because like I am arguing that without empathy, we wouldn't even really be able to maintain social contracts.
So I don't agree with that. I don't think that emotions do matter when it comes to deciding law or ethics or morals. You say that without empathy, we can't maintain social contracts. I mean, I can be very selfish. I want to play computer games all day, and then I want to go out and I want to drive my car, and I don't want anybody to fuck with me. I don't care about anybody else, but I don't want anybody to fuck with me. I understand that in order for me to assume that nobody else will fuck with me, I can't fuck with anybody else. Because as soon as I go over to my neighbor's house and start fucking his shit up, what right do I have for other people to not fuck me up? So like using social contract, I think that you can generate a system of ethics and morals that works even on people with no empathy whatsoever. Even if I don't give a fuck, I could maybe watch my neighbor die in his front yard of a fucking heart attack and walk away from it and not care. But I still wouldn't go over and kill him myself because I want that same respect for me.
I have a problem being convinced by this argument because the vast majority of people have empathy. So
a vast majority of people also feel feelings of like revenge and retribution.
Right? Like these emotions are valuable. Like we wouldn't have them if they weren't valuable and if they didn't help us form these social contracts, which allowed us to be this successful in the first place. Like one of the reasons why human beings are so successful is because we can cooperate so easily.
This is a really bad road to go down, I think, because you're saying essentially that these emotions serve some value to us, which I don't really want to agree with that. But if I did agree with that, then my next question would be, well, emotionally, you know, we are very much drawn to enjoying, you know, eating meat. Like this is something that has a huge cultural impact to us. It's something that we've done throughout all of our history. Eating meat is something that we are biologically wired to do. We've got sharp canines on the front that help us tear into flesh.
Okay, well,
we've got the enzymes to digest. Well, yeah, we've got the enzymes and everything to digest. You know, all the different.
We haven't evolved digestive enzymes for the reason of digesting meat. Like we have pepsin and trypsin; those are the two basic ones that digest protein. They happen to be able to digest meat. Like cows, rabbits, they have pepsin and trypsin. Like they can actually digest meat. Like we haven't actually made really any physiological adaptations to eat meat.
Well, why do we have sharp teeth in the front of our mouth and our canines?
Well, we don't.
Compared
like
to
our canines
in the back?
Like our canines aren't sharp. They don't protrude. They're terrible for digging.
They might not protrude a ton, but we digested and ate raw meat for a long time, right?
Not really. If you look at Australopithecus specimens, a lot of them have. Well, I guess there aren't too many, but there are Australopithecus specimens that have bone abnormalities consistent with vitamin A toxicity. So what that suggests is Australopithecus, when they first started eating meat, they weren't able to really consume like muscle tissue. So what they relied on was organs, particularly the liver, which is particularly soft, easy to rip off and chew. Liver happens to be extremely high in vitamin A, and it's very easy to suffer chronic and acute toxicity from vitamin A. And one of the side effects of that are bone abnormalities. And that's like that again. That's more evidence that we haven't really adapted to eat meat.
Why did we consume raw meats for so long? Hunting was such a big part of like early humanity.
Well, because you could either choose to die from not getting enough food, or you could, eat meat. It might give you some pretty bad health issues, but you'll survive and you'll be able to live long enough to pass on your genes. Doesn't mean we've made adaptations to eat meat. It just means it's good enough for us to survive.
Why do we have the ability to run like longer distances than any other animal if it was just to forage for plants? Or why do we have teeth in the front of our mouth? Why aren't all of our teeth just flat?
Well, again, if we look at other like primate species, like we have teeth that are very similar. I mean, what orangutans, they have bigger canines than we do, and they eat almost nothing but fruit. They eat some vegetation, like greens, and some insects. They have larger canines than we do. Like canines are an adaptation, like can be an adaptation for self-defense. There's also sexual selection, like females just may prefer that look. Like it's not
Sexual
necessarily an
selection that doesn't
adaptation to eat
confer
meat.
any other type of a biological advantage. That doesn't sound very reasonable to me. Isn't most selection made for, especially for males,
Well,
right? Would
I'm
be things
talking
that
about
offer you.
well, I just mentioned self-defense, and there's also sexual selection.
Sure. I get.
Well,
You probably know.
I'll give you peacocks as an example.
Uh-huh.
Peacocks, like female peacocks, go after peacocks with the largest tails.
Hmm.
The peacocks with the largest tails are very easily preyed upon by predators.
Gotcha.
So
So I guess like you could be
not well,
correct,
not every
but like,
like not every adaptation is completely ideal for something, and
uh-huh.
not every adaptation is the most practical. Like sometimes, like things like sexual selection and just not having enough time to adapt to something, like that happens.
Gotcha. I guess it's just strange to me that we have the ability to detect like rancid meat. We have the necessary faculty to digest raw meat, and we were given a very effective set of evolutionary tools to hunt.
Wait a second there. With raw meat, Dr. Richard Wrangham, who's an
Okay.
anthropologist, I think he's a professor at Harvard University. He's actually talked about how fire and cooking our food is what actually, caused our brain development.
Yeah, because it freed up so much of our
Right.
resources to, yeah.
Well, it not only freed up time, like we spent an insane amount of time chewing, but it
Yeah.
also just allowed us to get way more nutrients out of our food.
Yeah,
We
biological
don't,
resources, yeah.
yeah. So, like, yeah, we can digest raw meat, but we're not too good at it, and we're also very inefficient at like actually chewing it. Which is why early humans, before we had fire and any kind of tools, we'd we just eat the liver, and then we'd get vitamin A toxicity from it and get bone or abnormalities
Well,
or
but that
die
clearly
from acute
wasn't the only
toxicity.
thing we were eating. Hunting has always been a really big part of human history. Like it's not like all the people that ate meat like started to die of like I think you're blowing up this liver toxicity thing a lot. Like
I'm
maybe there are some people that suffered from this, but the vast majority of early humans ate right food or ate animals. Right. It was this discovery of agriculture
well,
that set off all of civilization.
when like if you're going to make that argument, like remember, the human species covers a vast portion of the globe, and what we ate was seasonal. We were nomadic creatures. Like you can't just say we ate a ton of meat all the time. Like
Well, we
it's
hunted for meat, but this isn't the argument that I would want to make. I wouldn't
well,
appeal to this. I'm just saying that when you
listen.
appeal to like emotion, I'm just saying that's kind of like a strange road to go down because then I could say, well, emotionally, like we enjoy eating meat, we're wired to eat meat or whatever. Like it just seems like a strange road to go down.
Well, we're not really wired to eat meat.
Well, okay,
I'd say, like,
we have the ability to digest it. We have the ability to tell if it's bad or not, and we
you've
enjoy the
well,
flavor of
yeah,
it substantially.
we have an ability to tell whether or not any food is bad or not. Like that's just important for us because we can easily get sick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
it's not like raw meat smells bad to us.
yeah, it does.
Period.
Yeah, it does.
Meat or dairy?
Oh, you mean before it goes bad?
Yeah. Before it goes bad, it's not like all of it smells bad, right? We have an ability to detect when it's gone past that rancid point, right? So I'm not trying to say that like I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make the argument that, like we need to eat meat to survive or anything. I'm just saying that eating meat has been a pretty big part of human history,
Well,
right?
what I'm saying, like, I'm not denying that, but I'm saying we haven't really made any physiological adaptations to eat meat, at least none that are adequate to suggest that it's a healthy part of our diet to any extent. And we don't have any biological drive to eat meat. It's entirely cultural. Like, you even admitted yourself you have no interest in killing animals. Like, if you have no interest in killing animals, how is eating meat a biological instinct?
Well, maybe. Well, I mean, that might have been an instinct that's been weeded out by living in society. I mean, I also don't have like an instinct to kill other people, but I mean, if I lived in like a forest or some shit and I saw a neighboring tribe, maybe I would. I mean, society nurture to a large extent is weeded out a lot of that. So like, I'm not going to try to make an argument that this is some like ingrained natural thing. I would just say, I was just speaking to you earlier saying, well, we have emotions and they're important, but you could use that to justify like a lot of really fucked up shit. Well, like if the meat eating thing isn't like adequate, you could say that like people are tribalistic to some extent, right? People like to stay next to people that look like other people or look like themselves, right? So you could make that argument to justify racism or something like that,
Okay. I don't really want to quite end the discussion right here, but like the problem I'm still seeing is like you're refusing to accept that the actual outcome of the situation like has any significance, and it correct me if I'm wrong.
What do you mean by outcome?
Well, I mean like just causing unnecessary suffering. Like you're basically saying that outcome has like no value as long as it doesn't affect you. Like that's pretty much what you're saying. Like as long as it doesn't break a social contract. Like the thing is, why does the social contract, why is that the only thing that matters? Like whether or not you break a social contract, why does outcome not matter at all? Like the outcome of unnecessarily causing the suffering and death of animals, why does that not matter? Only because you're not breaking a social contract. Like correct me if I'm wrong, but really what your argument seems to be, as long as it won't ultimately come back and affect me, like I don't care. Like it just seems like an I don't care argument.
Sure. So are you asking me to justify how I like axiomatically approach the social contract or whatever? Is that essentially like I'm so when I look for morals or ethics, I'm looking for things that I can try to impose on other people because I want them to share my point of view. So I feel like the social contract is something that I can very easily impose on other people. I could tell another person, listen, I want you to believe these things because if you believe them, it will be the best for you, right? I would approach most of these arguments in a self-interested way. I want you to believe this, not because it's better for everybody, blah, 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 but because it's better for you, right? So I feel like it's the easiest kind of idea to spread to another person. It is why I favor things like the social contract so much.
Okay, well, it might be easier to explain these ideas to another person, like especially if somebody's a sociopath. But
well, no,
I still don't.
No. That's not valid. Right? We've already gone over this. Like, I can very easily get a sociopath on board with what I believe because it's in their personal interest, right? Yeah,
I understand that, but I still don't see how that makes like the outcome of needlessly causing the suffering and death of sentient beings like value. Like it doesn't matter.
Well, but it's not completely without reason, right? It's because meat tastes good, right? Would be the argument for doing it. And then
right,
if you've got an activity that's pleasurable or enjoyable and somebody tells you can't do it, the burden is on them to say, okay, well, why is this activity immoral, right? Akin to something like masturbation, right? Tell me why I can't do this if all I see it is a way to, enrich or pleasure myself. And I don't see the value in animals. You have to make the argument that animals are worthy of value or respect in order to make that jump and say you need to reduce suffering, right? Because you've got to give a reason to care about why they're suffering or if their suffering is even something you should be concerned with.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this just so I can get a better understanding of your social contract argument. Like this might sound a bit weird. Let's say if you saw your girlfriend getting raped and you had the power to stop it, you would, right?
For sure.
Okay, if your girlfriend saw you getting raped and she didn't have the power to stop it, like, would that be okay for you to, would you there in that situation, knowing that your girlfriend wouldn't have the power to stop you from getting raped, would you still allow your girlfriend to get raped?
Well, no. I mean, you would hope that everybody tries as hard as they can. I mean, not everybody's perfect, but I would hope that people would do what they could.
Okay, like again,
it's like let me like I don't see there being a fundamental difference. Let's say that I see a child fall in the pool, okay, or let's say that there's a guy walking near a pool and a child falls in, and that guy could jump in and save that child, and he doesn't, right? I would think that would be a morally reprehensible action for him to not just, if it's very easy for him to hop in the pool and get the child out. Now, let's say that you're on a cruise ship and there's a massive storm that comes by and a child falls out of a boat and there's another guy, and he doesn't jump into the raging waters to save the child, like I'm not going to give him the same amount of shit. I'm not going to say, well, why didn't you risk your life to do it, right? I don't think that would be a very fair thing to do.
Okay, well, like what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is you're basically saying the only reason you'd hold a social contract is so that someone else upholds a social contract. So it's basically like you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of thing.
Yep.
So if your girlfriend wouldn't be able to prevent you from being raped, what would be your justification to stop someone from raping your girlfriend?
So I would expect her or any other person to do what they could. Now,
well, why does it matter if they could do what they could? Like, if you know that they would fail, like I thought the social contract was so that it would benefit you. So if your girlfriend can't benefit you in that situation, why would you do it for her? Because again,
because the social contract isn't, I hope everybody does everything perfectly. It's that I hope everybody tries as much as they can. If she can't do anything, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden I drop every other agreement I have with every other person just because she wouldn't be physically capable of doing a certain thing, right? It would just be, well, if you're not capable.
I'm not saying you drop every other like contract with every other person. The thing is, if your girlfriend couldn't help you in that particular situation, your social contract, your social contract argument seems to sort of fall apart a bit.
Because everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. For instance, let's say that I get a tear in my pants or something, right? She has a serger and a sewing machine upstairs. She could fix it for me. I could never fix any of her clothes. She wouldn't even want me to try. Trust me, it would be a fucking disaster. I don't even do the fucking laundry because I would probably fuck everything up. But just because I'm not capable of fixing her clothes doesn't mean that she's not going to fix mine, right? These are things that she's capable of doing, right? Or maybe preparing certain meals that I'm not capable of preparing. Like she can do things that I can't do, and I can do things for her that that she can't do, right? I provide a place to live. I pay for food and all of our living and everything, right? There's trade-offs, right? Just because we aren't capable of 100% synchronous reciprocation of every single possible thing doesn't mean that no reciprocation can take place at all, right?
Okay. If that's the case, then like a dog can still reciprocate like a social contract to you to some extent. Like they can give love and affection back to you. So wouldn't that also grant them some kind of right to treat them well, like not abuse and kill them?
So I feel like we're not really talking about social contract at this point, because social contract is also like not doing things as well, right? Like we're not, social contract doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to help each other as much as possible, more so that we have to kind of respect each other's individual rights, which is something that a dog, I guess maybe with a fuck ton of training, maybe a dog could. But even at that, I'm not sure if it would be at the level of even what like a primitive human could do. But like things like trespassing on property, stealing things, killing people, like these are social contracts that people can respect, not necessarily just helping or loving people, but also respecting the rights and autonomy of other people as well.
Okay.
If you were going to make an argument about a social contract, dogs are a really good way to go, though, because dogs have been literally bred to be like man's best friend over hundreds of years, and they have like a really big, like probably even a biological drive to be on man's side. Yeah.
Right. I was just asking you that to just understand your social contract argument a bit more, because it's still very bizarre and confusing to me. Like that, someone would go to this extent to say, like, social contract is the only thing that matters at all.
Sure, and I understand that. And again, like when I talk about most of these things, especially morals or ethics, I think it's really important to be very rigid and very cold, because when you start bringing emotion into these, you get into a lot of like inconsistent bullshit where people are picking favorites or inconsistently applying their beliefs. Like I try to be as rigid on this as possible. I know it comes off as
logic,
very cold.
Like logic is a good thing, but like the thing I'm saying is, the golden rule, like empathy does matter, and even though. Like, I think we should use both. We should both use logic and empathy in situations. And
so I don't understand it,
like,
because like it just leads to so much. Like, for instance, look at like fucking Islamic people, right? Empathy could lead you into thinking that a woman wants to wear the hijab because she's protecting her body and she's protecting other men against their own whims. And if we empathize with each other, we understand that everybody is naturally, inclined to these horrible human things, right? I feel like if you go down the emotional path, you can just get into so many weird areas where people are making these really dumb arguments, and it's like, well, let's just think about this reasonably.
Well, I'm not saying we should throw logic out the window. The thing is, it's sort of like you are throwing logic out the window to some extent, because you're basically saying we should just allow needless suffering when we've already come to the conclusion between humans, like, needless suffering is wrong. Like, why can't we just come to that conclusion with animals? Like, needless suffering is just wrong.
Well, that's kind of the gap that has to be bridged, right? Is to, well, why does it matter if animals suffer? Like, needless suffering is it doesn't mean anything, right? There's a needless suffering of trees and rocks or any other kind of compound, but you have to make the argument for why animals
trees and rocks aren't sentient. They can't experience suffering.
But even what sentience means and experience suffering, these are all very human, very loaded terms, right? I mean, we're all slaves to mechanical processes, right? As I said before, like, if you're talking about suffering or the avoidance of pain is really just an organism avoiding negative stimuli to maximize chances.
Well, again, like, even if that's true, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Like, I think you can understand that
no, it doesn't,
you wouldn't want to be tortured.
Sure, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, but the onus is on you to make it matter, right? Like, so is it just like a certain biological process all of a sudden, makes an animal somehow get the right that humans do in terms of respect for life? Or like, that's the bridge.
We've already determined that with other human beings, essentially.
Yeah, because human beings can reciprocate, right? That's the foundation.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's just because we can reciprocate. Like,
maybe
again,
not for everybody. I agree with that. Maybe everybody. Some people are emotional about it. Sure.
Well, listen. I think there's a reason why we don't have the death penalty in every country and every state.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a reason why we don't have corporal punishment in every country and every state. So,
but even the people that argue against the death penalty use the most irrational arguments all the time. How many times have you heard somebody say, like, how many times have you heard somebody say the death penalty is wrong? And then somebody's like, well, I think we need to punish criminals. And then they say something like, well, life in prison is a worse punishment than the death penalty, so that should make you happy. Well, I thought we were avoiding the death penalty because it was bad. Now you're saying life in prison is even worse. So which is it, right? I mean, people make irrational arguments all the time. I don't really look towards like other parts of society to try to figure out my system of logic or reason. Like,
the point I'm trying to make is, we don't create policies entirely based on social contract. We do rely on empathy, like, really most of the time. All these laws, I really doubt we were thinking, what is the best, most efficient way to, make society go forward? Okay, well, let's create a social contract. Like, nobody thought of these laws using that sort of reasoning. Like, it really started from the golden rule, like, treat others how we would want to be treated. We can understand that, like, we wouldn't want to cause unnecessary, like, suffering to another human. Like, I don't understand how we can't extend that reason, like, why it's unreasonable to extend that reasoning to humans. Like, I'm still not, like, really the biggest to animals. Like, the problem I'm having is, why do you think it's unreasonable to create policies to extend that to animals when it would literally, like, not cause, it would even benefit humanity? Like, our health would improve, the environment would improve, like, and you would be reducing suffering. But, like, for some reason you're just saying suffering doesn't matter.
So again, we're kind of like, we're bundling a lot of like what we talked about together, but I mean, we've kind of gone through these individually. Like, in terms of it benefiting humanity, we don't make laws to benefit humanity. That's not typically how laws work. We typically make laws to.
Well, yeah, it is.
But no, we don't. For instance, we don't have laws around the types of foods you can eat. We don't have laws that make it so.
Well, again, that is partly to benefit humanity. We want to extend personal freedoms as much as possible.
Yeah. So exactly. So what we're really looking to do with legislation, we're typically looking to protect liberty. Is typically the function. Right. We're looking to protect.
But why do you think
healthier or better or?
But why do you think you should have the liberty to torture and kill animals?
Well, because the argument hasn't been made that animals are worthy of any kind of protection, right?
Well,
okay, so like, why is it okay to hack a tree into two, but it's not okay to hack the head off of a bear, right?
Because bears are sentient beings that can experience pain and suffering. They have a similar emotional range to us. Like, we can understand that even though they don't have the cognitive capacity that we do, we can understand that, they're a living thing on this earth that is similar enough to us where they should be granted some sort of protection or given some sort of respect.
Yeah, so I can argue, or I can understand that, but we're coming back to the central point again, right? We're like, why does the sentience of an animal, why do these biological processes entitle them to the same rights as people? What is the reason, right? I think we kind of keep running back into this. It's kind of the central point of
Well, like
disagreement.
the weird thing with you is you don't seem to put any sort of value on life or well-being at all. Like you just flat out said, yeah, it's totally fine to massacre a tribe of people if they can't reciprocate rights or, agree to a social contract with you.
Mhm.
Like you could do that exact same thing and justify the Holocaust, really.
But you can't, right? We already went over
Well, you
this.
can.
What's your well? What is your argument? Let's say you
Okay,
argue.
well, to what extent? Like, listen.
Well, for that particular example, if you're a Nazi, what's your argument for treating Jews as less than human? Like, what is your rationalization there for that, or your rationale for that? Sorry.
Well, you've said a social contract is essentially what we should. I don't even see how a social contract makes, like, really the fundamental problem here is a social contract doesn't actually make anything moral.
Sure.
Like, you could
can
just
agree with that,
choose to not have a social contract with anyone.
Yeah, but if you
Like,
choose
you
to not have a
would.
social
No, no,
contract
no,
with
no,
someone,
no.
then they could choose the same, and then someone will kill you.
Well, is that wrong?
No,
And you're
someone else
saying
is
no.
rejecting the social contract. No, of course not. I'm very much for property rights
Well, no.
and treating
Okay,
people who are fucking your shit up. Yeah.
Okay, so what the Nazis did wasn't wrong. They can choose to just reject the social contract.
Well, when you say wrong, when we're talking right or
Well,
wrong, I think we're
morally
usually
wrong.
talking in regards to our society. Now, if you're asking me if they can do it, I mean, did the Nazis reject the social contract and kill the Jews? Well, yeah, sure. I
Well,
mean,
right. Was it wrong? Like, was the Holocaust wrong?
in my eye, what you're asking me is you're saying that, like, okay, well, if these people reject your morality, aren't they immoral in your morality? Well, yeah, of course, but they've already rejected my morality, so what does it matter? Like, I mean, I think that the Nazis are wrong, but are you asking me if they have the ability to reject my morality? Of course they do, and I would say the same for slave owners or people that think that women are subhuman compared to men. Like, yeah, I mean, the Nazis rejected, what I would consider my personal morality, and they rejected the morality of a lot of people. I mean, I guess it's within their rights to do so. Anybody can do whatever they want, but I'm not going to sit here and say, well, they're moral because they rejected my morality.
What I'm getting from you is basically it's as if you're trying to say, like, morals don't exist. The only thing that matters is social contract. Whether or not you can create a social contract with other people which allows you to, like, basically protect your own self.
Yep. Essentially, yeah. I don't argue.
That is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't argue for any kind of
the Holocaust was totally like the Holocaust wasn't wrong, wasn't right or wrong. It's just that it happened.
So under my particular morality, under my social contract morality, I would argue that it was wrong. Anytime you exit the social contract, I would assign a moral.
Why is exiting a social contract wrong?
Because now you're on a level that's very different than me. Because you're not going to respect my. Because you don't respect my personal autonomy anymore. You don't respect my right to life or my right.
Well, why do I have to? Like,
well, you don't. But then I'm not going to respect yours.
Okay, so then you agree that causing unnecessary suffering and death is wrong because this doesn't have anything to do with a social contract anymore. Like, you're just saying it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering and death
to humans. Yeah, that's part of my social contract.
Well, no, I don't have to respect that social contract, so I could just say it's fine to kill humans.
If you don't respect my social contract, then that means that I no longer respect you as a human. So
right.
You're removed from that. Yeah.
Right. So there's no such like you keep going back and forth. You said that it's wrong to break a social contract. Well, why is it wrong to break a social contract?
Well, you're asking me like you're asking me from a meta position. A person has morality A and there's morality B. Could an outside hypothetical observer, would he say that it's wrong to move from morality A to B? No, I mean, if you want to from an ultimate frame of reference, that guy could say that, okay, well, he moved from A to B, that's fine. But now a person who believes in morality A, like I do, if I see you move from my morality to something different, then I would say that's wrong. But it depends on, like, I guess the observer that you're talking about. Like,
Destiny, like, the reason we even have social contracts in the first place is to reduce pain and suffering, even if it's even just for our own benefit. It's to reduce pain and suffering
of humans.
So you have to. Well, why does that only matter for humans? Like, we create social contracts to benefit each other, but you have to agree fundamentally that suffering and death is a bad thing, like, for the most part, as long as it's unnecessary.
Yeah, for humans, for sure.
Well, why does that only apply to humans?
Because why would it apply to anything else?
Well, like you already agree. Like so why does human life matter at all?
Because I'm human, and in order for my life to matter, unless you have an argument for why you are extra special, like for like racist people will make the argument that a certain race is.
I'm not saying humans are extra special. I'm saying like why does any life matter at all?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that because for me to believe that my life is important, right? I have to believe that other lives are important too, because I don't think that I'm intrinsically different than any other human being, right?
Right.
So my respect for humans comes out of the fact that I am a human, and if I want my life to be respected as a human, I have to respect other humans' rights to life. Like that has to be, unless I think I'm a godlike figure or somehow special from every other human, right?
Like again, you're like the social contract isn't coming I don't see how the social contract is coming before morality. Like you're basically like you have to start off with the position that at least your life matters for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It is immoral to kill you or cause your suffering for no justifiable reason. So a social contract is a good way to develop some sort of moral standard, at least within the own human population. But again, you're starting from the standpoint that like sentient life matters, like sentient beings who have the will to live, their lives matter, and unnecessary suffering is a bad thing. So I don't understand how you can just say animal suffering doesn't matter because I'm human. Like, sure, so that makes no sense.
So like my fundamental axioms would be that my life matters, I guess, which I think most people agree on that. I think therefore I am right. I know I exist and I know that my life matters, right? And then from there, I know that there are other humans that are similar to me. And because I want to exist, right? If that's like my fundamental axiom is that I want to exist and I don't want other people to fuck with my existence is like my fundamental belief, right? Now, from that point of view, I want to maximize whatever I can to maintain that belief. I want to exist and I want other people to fuck with me. And for me, I think that the most rational way of doing that is to demand for others the same rights that you would demand for yourself. That's where the social contract comes from, right? Now, if I was faced with a bear or a deer or probably not a deer, whatever, I don't know, anything else, a lion, a tiger that would want to eat me, right? It doesn't matter what part of the social contract or how I engage with him or whatever, that dude is going to fucking eat me if he's hungry or if I seem threatening or whatever, right? So I don't really give a fuck what he thinks, what an animal thinks about that, because they're not capable of engaging in me with the social contract in this way. I'm not a tiger. I'm not concerned with the existence of tigers. I'm a human. That's what I am. I'm concerned with the existence of other humans because I know they could be concerned with my existence. This is how my moral code kind of works.
So you're basically saying you don't give a shit about anyone else other than yourself, and the only reason you create a social contract with people is just to save your own ass.
Correct.
Okay.
But I think I can extend that to every other person too, so that they can all be self-interested in much the same way. Yeah.
Right. I think the majority of people watching might find that a bit fucked up.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think that's how people actually form morals. I think you might actually have a psychological problem. Like, I'm not saying that as an insult. Like,
listen, dude, I totally 100% agree with you, right? But I would also say to the same, and I would say for you as well. Like, if you're a meat eater and you feel uncomfortable with everything I'm saying, which I imagine and I'm sure you would agree, there are probably a lot of meat eaters that they hear what I'm saying that are really uncomfortable with what I'm saying. Like, maybe you should re-examine your beliefs, because you either have to jump on board with what I'm saying, I believe, and that you don't give a fuck if a dog or a cat gets killed, or you need to re-examine what you think about animals, and maybe you should become a vegan as well. Like, I mean, that would be my argument.
Okay, Destiny. So again, like from my position, like I'm still convinced that you don't just create a social contract just to save your own ass. Like, okay, maybe that's how you see things, but I don't think that's how the human civilization has created social contracts. I think we understand that life is valuable, at least certain life, like sentient life that can experience pain and suffering. And we created social contracts to at least help our own species. But we're starting from the point where we recognize that life does matter and suffering, like reducing suffering, is important. So
well, if you're reducing human suffering, just clarify.
Right. So do you think it is morally justified for like an advanced alien species to just come down and wipe out humanity?
So like, this is
Like,
Yeah,
again,
this is a really good question, right? And this is one that I've actually wrestled with on stream before, right? So my argument would be, so your argument, you're essentially saying aliens come down to Earth. We'll argue the aliens are perfect logisticians. If you can out-argue them, then they let you exist, right? The alien says to you, we are sufficiently advanced compared to you. You are nothing to us. You guys have deemed it appropriate to kill animals on your planet because they're nothing, because they're lesser to you. So what argument do you have against us to stop us from killing you, right? Is essentially your question.
essentially,
Yeah, and that's a really, really, really good question. It's one of like the best ones I've found to kind of stop the meat eating stuff. For my answer to them, my response to them would be, assuming that these are perfect logisticians, right? My argument to the aliens would be, we are sufficiently advanced such that we can intellectually recognize your right to exist, much the same way that you could do the same to us. If you want to destroy us, you can. But if we play this recursively, if a sufficiently advanced alien civilization stumbles upon you guys, what arguments will you have to avoid annihilation from them if you destroy
well, again,
us?
this is just the golden rule.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And because
Well,
we're
like,
capable of reciprocating the golden
this,
rule, I would hope that the aliens would respect our
this
right to
really
exist.
doesn't have anything to do with reciprocation. I really don't
Well,
see.
but the golden rule is reciprocation, right?
No, it isn't. No, it literally isn't.
Wait,
Golden
treat
rule
others
has
as you want
nothing
to
to
be
do with
treated?
reciprocation. Don't treat someone else the way you wouldn't want to be treated. That has nothing to do with reciprocation.
Oh, I thought that. Whoa, I'm sorry. I always kind of interpreted that as reciprocation.
No, don't do something to someone that you wouldn't want done to yourself. That really has nothing to do with reciprocation. So again, like you fundamentally understand that that sentient life is valuable and that like suffering does matter. Like it's a good thing to reduce suffering. It's a good thing to reduce death.
Wait,
And
so do you believe in the golden rule?
yeah, like don't
let's say that somebody wanted to sleep at your house for the night, and this person was a known murderer who was also a Ku Klux Klansman, and he knocks at your door to come in.
This is different. Like this is a different situation. You do have to look out for your own interests, but
yeah, so you have to follow the golden rule, but only if the other person is following the golden rule. It's reciprocated, right?
Well, no, you do have to protect yourself. Like you don't follow the golden rule to the point where it's going to lead to your death.
Yeah, but if you're following the golden rule with somebody else that's following the golden rule, that's reciprocating it, then you're generally okay, right? That's usually how the golden rule works, I would imagine.
Okay, well, I wouldn't steal someone's wallet, even if I knew the guy was a thief. I just think it's wrong to just steal from someone. Like, people don't have to reciprocate the same ideas for it to be immoral for you to do something to them.
For sure, I agree with that. But again, you're typically not being that way because you don't want other people to be that way at all.
Like Destiny, I don't understand how you can agree that it's wrong for an alien civilization to just wipe out all of humanity, but you don't agree that it isn't wrong. You don't agree that it's wrong for us to just torture and kill animals.
Yeah, so my argument would be that humans can recognize and respect the existence of other aliens. Why does that matter? Well, because that's the central point on whether the aliens on whether they should respect our existence.
That really doesn't have anything to do with morals.
Well, but what does suffering of animals, the biological processes, have to do with morals?
Well, like again, it's because we have empathy and we can understand that we wouldn't want to suffer. So why would you do that to animals?
Yeah, but if you're saying that my reciprocation doesn't matter, why does that matter?
I think you're trying to suggest that morals are subjective and they therefore don't exist, so you can do whatever the fuck you want. Is that basically what you're trying to say?
In terms of like, yeah, I'm pretty relativistic in regards to how my morals work. Sure, as long as whatever.
Well, we already established that it's wrong to needlessly cause the suffering and death of other beings, whether there's a social contract. Like, I don't understand how.
For me.
Well, I don't understand why it would matter that there's a social contract. Like, we understand that we wouldn't want to feel suffering and suffering. We wouldn't want to die. So whether or not you've established a social contract with anyone.
Well, because our not wanting to die is all part of the social contract. For instance, let's say I walk into another person's house and I do want to steal their shit. I've got a gun. I walk in, right? But when I do that, I've accepted the possibility that this person will kill me. Like, that's part of what's going on. If I break into somebody's house and I want to steal their shit, I'm accepting the possibility that this guy wakes up and kills me. Like, that's part of that deal, right?
You're not like that. I don't understand how that has any relation to needlessly killing an animal?
Well, I guess I'm talking about like if you make the decision to leave the social contract, right? You accept that. I'm not saying that like it's morally bad to kill always because just killing is bad. I'm saying that part of that is wrapped up in the social contract, but that killing will become acceptable if you leave it. Like these aren't like hard moral absolutes or whatever, right? There are times when we kill people in self-defense or I guess in war. If that's morally justifiable or not, that's a whole other thing.
Wait, let me think. This argument still doesn't make any sense to me because you're the one who's like, you're the antagonist in the situation where you're killing animals. Like, I also used the like uncontacted tribe example. So like there is actually an uncontacted, really primitive tribe living on a small island. If anyone comes near there, they actually shoot arrows. Like, who cares if they can't establish a social contract? The thing is, you're going over there and needlessly fucking killing them and wiping them out.
Yeah, you keep saying needlessly.
That?
You keep saying needlessly,
Well,
like
yeah,
it's some kind of moral argument. But, but a lot of what we do is needless, right? Like what, like the type of shirt you're wearing, the color of your chair.
Well, dude, no. You're trying to like really wiping out an entire population of people is just as trivial as me picking a red chair to sit on.
If it's not, then you have to provide the reason why it's not. Like again, like you're trying to appeal to emotion, where you're saying like, oh well, it's obviously wrong to wipe out a civilization of people that can't. But like, then I have to ask like, well, why? Other than because it's wrong. Right?
I'm not just saying because it's wrong. We've already established that it's wrong to needlessly kill other human beings. I don't think a social contract has anything to do.
But there was more loaded in that. When you said it's wrong to kill other human beings, right? Well, sure, but that's
needlessly. Like there are contexts.
Part of that needlessly is if they follow the social contract, right? That's where the needless comes from. Like if somebody is threatening your right to life, or if somebody doesn't respect your right to life, then you don't share that same respect with them. That's fine. If they would kill me given the opportunity to.
Well, totally. But the thing is, like, okay, look at it from this. Like, I don't even need to do this. Okay, so why is it justified to go over to a tiny small island that you don't need to go to, have literally no benefit to you taking this tiny small island? Why would you just massacre a whole bunch of people? Like, why is that morally justified?
It's not. It would be morally neutral.
Morally neutral to massacre a whole group of people.
Correct.
Okay.
If they're not capable of respecting a social contract, if you were to show up on this island, right? So like you make it sound like really bad, but say you float up on this island and you go there and your boat capsized or some shit, and you and your family were there, and these people found you and they strung you up and they skinned you alive, and then they grilled you over a fire and they tortured you, and then they ate you and consumed your bodies and your corpses and everything, right? Like, I mean, I could phrase this in such a way that like, well, what would keep me from sending people to this island to you know, exterminate this group of people, right? And now it doesn't sound quite as bad, you know, as opposed to like the peaceful nomadic people that just wander and you happen to go there with machine guns and you go full Avatar on the island and blow it all up, you know, like, I mean, you can make it sound bad, but when we're talking about like moral arguments, like you're talking about a group of people that are incapable of respecting my right to life. So no, I have no arguments to respect their right to life. So everything is in regards to them is morally neutral.
Yeah, this is a very strange argument. Like, what's strange to me is you're valuing social contract above life itself.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but we all do. Even you do, right? If a human is coming into your house with a gun to murder you, you don't value his life. You don't give a fuck about his life, right?
Well, that's not valuing social contract above life itself. That's just me valuing my life above his life. Like, you're literally saying social contract is more valuable than life itself. So that gives you the right to massacre an entire population of people.
Well, in terms of how rights are doled out, right? You look to government to limit rights. So you assume that you can unless there's a law that tells you you can't. So just because I'm saying you can do something doesn't mean I'm saying it's morally righteous to do something. You can go outside and tear up every piece of grass or kill all the squirrels in your backyard if you want. Like, you can do that. I'm not saying that it's morally righteous to. I'm just not saying it's morally incorrect to do so either.
Okay, so we talked about like you like, just to be clear, you did say it's basically morally neutral to torture an animal to death, like skin it alive and kill it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
You'd consider that morally neutral?
Yes.
Okay, so would it also be morally neutral to go over to that island where the indigenous people live? Would it be morally neutral to tie them all up and like rape them all to death, even like the little children?
Yeah, it would have to be, yes.
Really?
Assuming
Okay.
we're assuming in this example that this is a group of people that could never ever
Right,
ever
right,
grow to respect social contract, right? So
right. Okay.
when you say children, I kind of wonder, do you mean like people that could be like integrated into society that could grow to be part of like, because if that was the case, then obviously no, that would be abhorrent. But if this was like a group of beings that were for some reason incapable of ever respecting social contract or other people's right to live, then yeah, of course you would have to say yeah.
Okay. That's some crazy shit. All right. I don't know. Hey Jasmine, how long have we been doing this?
What?
How long have we been doing the stream?
Over 2 hours, I think?
Okay.
At least 4 hours?
I don't think there's really much else to cover. Yeah, like so yeah, so from my perspective, like I guess we'll just, make our final statements. Like from my perspective, the reason why I find your perspective wrong is because you're placing ultimate value on social contract rather than life itself and the overall well-being of like humans and like other animals on the planet. I think like life itself and overall well-being is worth more than social contract. So for that reason, I think it is wrong to needlessly cause suffering and death. Like just because you don't have a social contract there, I don't think that like makes it morally justifiable or morally neutral to needlessly cause suffering and death just because a social contract is there. I don't think social contract makes life valuable.
Can I ask you a question? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure.
So let's say, I'm sure you've heard this one before, but like, let's say that there's a train and it's headed down a track and it's going to run over, 10 people, and you have the ability to push somebody in front of that train that would stop the train from running over those 10 people. So it's basically a 1 life versus 10. Would you push the person to do it?
Yeah, probably would.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Then you're morally consistent, I guess. So my answer to that would be no, because I would be placing somebody in harm's way that shouldn't be placed in somebody's harm's, or it shouldn't be placed in harm's way. To take that a couple steps further, then let's say that somebody came up to you and they said, "Hey, I'm a stranger person on the street. Otherwise, aside from this one condition, I'm a very healthy person. I need 1 kidney. You can probably live the rest of your life pretty healthily with only a single kidney. Would you give me 1 kidney, please, so that I can continue to live?" So you're basically inconveniencing yourself with a surgery so that another person could live. Would you always accept this deal?
No, not always. Like if it was my wife, sure. But if it was some stranger, no.
Why, if you knew that it's not like a murderer or somebody that's going to die of HIV
Right.
or something in a day, like, why would you not accept that?
Well, because I just place my own well-being and the value of my life above a perfect stranger.
Even though there's no threat of you dying? Or
yeah,
very, very,
yeah,
very
absolutely. Well, there would be a threat of me dying of kidney disease, but like say, even if it were like if we had really great medical technology and there's no chance of me dying, I still wouldn't do it.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
I don't.
Seems a bit strange to me that you would make
like,
the
I don't
choice.
see that. I don't see that as like consistent, like inconsistent for my views, because I don't have this like all or nothing kind of mentality that you do. Like I take context into consideration, and yeah, like I don't value everyone's life as equal. Like my wife is more valuable than some random person on the street.
Sure. So then here's an even more extreme question. I'm pretty sure you know the answer to. Let's say that a doctor had the opportunity to kill you to give your organs to a number of other people to save them. I'm guessing you probably wouldn't be okay with that.
Yeah.
Why would you be okay with pushing 1 person in front of a train to save 10 people, but you wouldn't be okay with a doctor killing you to save 10 other people with your organs?
Well, I guess basically because it would end up killing me. Like it would be easier to make that decision if I pushed like another person in front of a train.
Gotcha.
But
so
like
that
again,
kind of inconsistency bothers me. So you would be okay. So in that same example, you would be okay pushing 1 person in front of a train to save 10, but if somebody pushed you in front of a train to save 10, you wouldn't be okay with that outcome.
It's a little like, I don't know, these sort of scenarios are a little too abstract.
Well, I don't think they're that abstract. See, these are interesting. I like the abstractness of these scenarios because they let you really like fundamentally analyze your kind of system of values, right? So this is
Right.
where somebody like this is where I kind of have a benefit because everything that I do is very rigidly logically deduced, so I can give you an absolute answer. But if you make these decisions more emotionally, I think it could be a lot harder to arrive at like a conclusion that feels good at the end of these kinds of hypothetical problems, you know?
Right. Like the thing is, you're like when you're talking about the train scenario, it suggests like a weird split decision you'd have to make. Like if it's something to do with harvesting organs, it's, I don't know, it's a bit different. Like forcing somebody into an operating room and harvesting their organs is a bit different than like making a snap decision to push somebody in front of a train to like save a bunch of people. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Well, I mean, we can argue we can create the most convenient world, right? And we can say that you actually have a number of hours to choose whether or not you want to push the person in front of the train, right? To make the analogy still be relevant, right?
Okay.
Like,
All right.
this is where like so like for my social contract, I
Okay.
would say that like I
Then you
wouldn't
know
want
what?
somebody
Then
to
I'd
push
say
me.
no.
So you wouldn't
Then
push.
I'd say if yeah, like I guess if it's a similar situation where I'd have time to consider, then no.
Uh-huh. So, and I would agree with you, right? I wouldn't want to be pushed in front of a train to save 10 people. Maybe I would make that decision on my own. I don't know. Maybe I would, maybe I
Right.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big, I'm not going to sit here and lie and tell you I would do it. Like that would be like a very heroic thing to do. But I
Right.
definitely wouldn't want anybody else making that decision for me. And I wouldn't make that decision for another person.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that earlier in your arguments, you're always big on like, you don't care about what the conclusions are. You don't care about what the end results are.
Well,
And earlier I told you that, well, no, I don't. I care more about the morality of the particular decision. And here it kind of sounds like that's what you're saying for the training. You don't really care about the outcome. We're interested more in the morality of this particular decision than whether or not 10 people live or one person lives, right?
Well, I'm saying outcome should be considered.
Yeah, but like in this particular scenario, you're saying that the outcome isn't really
Like
relevant.
taking
You're
away,
looking at the
like,
morality of pushing
well, no,
one
no, no,
person in front
like
of a train.
taking away personal rights to like to create a better well-being for a number of people. I don't think that's necessarily a better thing.
Okay. And I agree with that. Regardless of kind of what that particular outcome is, I'm looking more at the particular morality of taking away the rights of another person, right?
Right. Well, like again, taking away someone's right to eat meat is a hell of a lot different than taking away someone's right to live. Like you're literally talking about harvesting somebody's organs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just saying, like, don't eat meat. Like the one's a lot more fucking reasonable.
Yeah, but we're not talking about what is reasonable, right? Like we could make laws that say you have to wear a helmet while driving, and that maybe that's actually safer than not. But we don't have that law because you have to justify the existence of a law rather than just say why not, right? That's not a good reason to make any particular thing something that's legally binding or even something morally or ethically binding. Like why not, right? You could make the same argument with masturbation, right? Anybody can live without masturbating, so why do it? Like you should be compelled not to do it. Well, no, you have to make an argument not to do it, otherwise.
Well, again, like this is something I don't think we're ever going to agree on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like you're basically saying, like life itself doesn't even really matter. Suffering doesn't even really matter. What like ultimately what matters is
non-human suffering and non-human life, right?
Right. Like all your well, even human life. You're basically saying it doesn't matter so long as there's no social contract.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's something we're just not going to agree on, at least not now. So.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll just end the discussion here. Thanks a lot, Destiny. I'll link your channel after this video goes up. And thank you to everyone who donated in the super chat. Yeah, this was a really interesting discussion. I think most people are saying I won, but I think these are like my fans for the most part.
Yeah, it's not good, and it's not like a winner loser thing. Like I consider it a really interesting discussion too. The hardest part on mine is like whether or not sentience should be respected, and that might be something that I change my mind on in the future. I fully admit that it's definitely possible I could. So I really appreciate this.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, and thank you to everyone who donated in the super chat. What? Okay, well, I'm gonna stay on the stream and I'm gonna read some of the super chats.
Yeah, sure. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot, Destiny.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate the conversation.
All right. See ya. All right. For some reason well, no, for some reason oh, here it goes. Oh, okay. Like for some reason I can't get into my dashboard. Like to actually, it's very strange. Okay. Are you gonna email me the super chats? Yeah, that, like, I don't think it's as easy to, well, like, honestly, I think it's just something that we're going to disagree on, but I still think I'm right, obviously. It's just that we can't agree upon this. Like the fundamental problem he's making is he's valuing social contract above life itself, which is very strange. Okay, Brightgeist Movies donated 10 euros. Thank you very much. You're my favorite vegan dick. Fuck all carnists and Islamists. Thank you very much for the donations, Brightgeist Movies. Bobrlov donated 50 DKK. Thank you very much. I hope he realizes he sounds like a lunatic sometimes. Keep it up. Thank you very much, Bobrlov. Yeah, he does sound kind of insane, and he worried me. Like, people call me a sociopath. Some of the stuff he was saying, like, he's perfectly fine with skinning animals alive. Just very strange. Andrew Carey just donated £1. Thank you very much, Andrew Curry. Or Carey? Yeah, Andrew Carey. Philippe. It's very hard to keep up with these. Philippe Salvo donated 20 sec. Thank you very much. Hey, Skype convo with me about nutrition. I'll pay. If you sign up to my Patreon, that's the easiest way to get into contact with me.
Discord.
Yeah, and just hop into my Discord server, and we can talk all you want. It's $20 per month. Like, if you're not interested in, paying $20 a month to keep going into my Discord, that's fine. But I can talk with you in Discord if you just donate 20 on Patreon. That's fine. Eric Soto just donated $2. Thank you very much, Eric. Fritz 0x00 donated $5. Someone should consider skinning Destiny alive. That's the thing. Like, if you're going to rely on social contract, like, as a basis for morality, like, you can't really do that, because then either anything can be considered moral or nothing's moral. So skinning him alive, like it's nothing. Like, everything just becomes morally neutral. Like, you have to start from a standpoint that certain things are not moral, and then you form social contracts around that understanding. Like, he's talking as if social contracts are what create morals. So he's got it backwards. It's a very strange way of thinking. Austin just donated $5. Thank you, Austin. I'm getting the feeling that you're either not being totally genuine with what you're saying, or you may be a sociopath. VeganGains, 4 minutes, 8 seconds. I don't know if I still have a feeling he's not being genuine with me. I think he was just saying that to be as logically consistent as possible. But who knows? Like, he might be a sociopath. He might have, like, an antisocial personality disorder. Orion just donated $10. Thank you very much, Orion. For all of your dedication and hard work, treat yourself well. Sent you self-treatment message therapy book on Facebook. Thank you very much, Orion. I'll check that out. Timing just donated $7.81. Can you make a weekly meal prep vid? Sure. I do have the what I eat in a day videos, but I do want to talk about, like, how to prepare vegan meals and stuff. Like, I normally just have the what I eat in a days, but I'll probably start making some videos about how to prepare vegan meals, why I eat a certain macronutrient ratio, and stuff like that. Thank you very much for the donation, Timing. Toby Wong just donated £10. Thank you very much. He said that plants not being sentient wasn't justification for setting a field ablaze, implying that it's not a neutral act. He done goofed right from the start. Well, I don't think he actually, like, he did recognize that setting a forest ablaze causes a whole bunch of issues. So, yeah, like he doesn't think plant sentience, like setting forests ablaze causes a lot of problems. Like, you know, if you set forests ablaze, it causes huge environmental issues, which eventually impacts humans. But his viewpoint was very strange. I've never encountered someone like that before. Extreme Comments 9 donated $2. What's your opinion on the Ask Yourself and OG Meeson situation? I don't know. I think they're both being a little petty. I think OG Meeson a little more than Isaac, and he just recently made a very strange video where he attempted to debunk the name the trait argument, and I think he did that just out of spite. I don't think he actually believed what he said in that video. So I don't think OG Meeson is being terribly honest. Let's see. Taryn Brace just donated £2. From a scale of ho to hot, how hot I your girlfriend? Yes, that is my answer. Yes. Thank you for the donation, Taryn Brace. Nuck the Whale Man donated 10 PLN.
That's Poland.
Oh, Poland, like I guess Polish currency. Does Destiny have sex logically? Logical erection? Yeah. Again, it's as if he's got the whole ethics thing totally backwards, as if social contract is what creates morals. It's like, no, we have a moral understanding that's essentially based on empathy, and that's how we create social contracts. Like, I do think morals are based on logic, but empathy and emotions are logical systems somewhat. So like he still has it backwards. Nobody donated 20 knock. Bicep shot, please. Okay, well, that's bicep shot is definitely worth 20 knock, I think. All right, Vandal just donated $5. Thank you very much. I have an interesting thought. If we grant that life is inherently valuable using your system, then why don't we prevent wolves from attacking deers? Like, the reason that is because wolves also have a right to life, and they need to eat deer to survive. And if there weren't any wolves, that would totally disrupt the ecosystem, and then neither deer nor wolves could exist. Like, you can't just say just because an animal kills another animal, therefore it doesn't deserve a right to life. Things are a bit more complicated than that. But we can agree that life is at least valuable enough that we shouldn't skin animals alive for no fucking reason. Shameless Types donated $2. I love this debate. Richard has his hands full. Like, it was interesting. Like, I've never encountered somebody who deployed that sort of argument before, so it was an interesting debate. I think I made a pretty good argument. Like, I'd still say I won, but you know, it's definitely an interesting discussion to have. Elin Korjuganova, Ilana Korjuganova donated 300. Is that rubles? I think that's rubles, or RUB. Thank you very much, Ilana. She says, I love your videos. Thank you, Ilana, for the big donation. Donald Trump donated $5. I don't think this is the real Donald Trump. I don't think he likes vegans too much. Tremendous. You show him, Richard. I love how you grab logic by the pussy. Tremendous indeed. Okay, maybe that is the real Donald Trump. Thank you for donating $5, Donald Trump. Rolling Rock donated $2. The social contract answers to fairness, emotion. Yeah, like, again, we create social contracts because we understand that it is moral to be fair to one another. Like, we have the golden rule. We understand that we don't want to do something to someone else that we wouldn't want to have done to us. And so we create social contracts. It doesn't happen the other way around. Luke Hands donated $2. Fan of both Destiny and VeganGains. Very interesting talk. Yeah, like, cool. I mean, I do appreciate Destiny's honesty. I think he's, like, I wouldn't say he's stupid at all. Like, I disagree with what he says. I think he's a fairly intelligent person, but like he does have his argument a little backwards. And but I really do appreciate his honesty. Like, Bearing, Roaming Millennial, No Bullshit, like, they're all incredibly dishonest. And even though what he said was like crazy to me, I do appreciate that he was being honest. Stefan R donated €5. Richard, don't support Ask Yourself anymore. He's a pussy that can't take criticism. Well, like, he's a friend of mine. Like, yeah, that'd be really friggin' awkward if I just didn't support him anymore. But, like, you know, people get into drama online, and he got into a thing with OG Mees, and I don't really care. Like, it doesn't mean I can't be friends with the guy. The Number Last donated $2. He says, niggers. I agree. Niggers. Simone Teleskin. Yeah, Simon Teleskin. I did my best. He donated 40 rubles. RUB. I think that's rubles. Newborns can't follow social contract. Well, exactly. Like, you get issues with that too. I'm sure his argument would be, well, a newborn baby could eventually follow social contract, so therefore you have to, like, it's immoral to kill newborns. But, like, again, like, his argument is backwards. Like, the reason why he thinks it's wrong to kill newborns is because of things like the golden rule. Like, he values life itself first and foremost, and then he creates, you know, social contract to protect life, or at least, you know, human life. Norvegan just donated 50 knock. Can you sing the beef outro before you go? Sure, I'll do that. I guess I'll just get through a few more comments, and I'll sing the beef outro. The Number Last donated $2. Dude, it's over. You lost? I don't think I lost. I think I explained my point pretty clearly. And okay, like, if you think that it's totally morally justified to skin an animal alive and let it suffer to death, then I think you have problems. Jared Cox donated $2. Yeah, but my enzymes. Yeah, like, I mean, at least Destiny didn't go with the whole enzyme argument. We did get into a little bit of a debate about, like, nutrition and human evolution, but that wasn't really the focus of the debate. Like, at least he wasn't just making up total bull crap like Roaming Millennial. Extreme Comments 9 donated $5. Don't be a waste man, VeganGains. Come back to Scarbs. Your dog misses you, and so do all the Muslims. Also, what's your favorite vegan restaurant in Toronto? My favorite vegan restaurant would probably still be Ital Vital. What's called Vitalife Vegan went away, and Ital Vital took over. It's basically the same food. It's like West Indian food. I think that's still my favorite restaurant. The Knowing Guy donated $5. Please crush Sir Sick, the social inequality crusader. He made a dumb anti-vegan video against Mike, the anti-vegan. Love these debates. Keep it up. I'll definitely check it up. Sir Sick, the Social Inequality Crusader. I'll definitely check out that video. Mike Wick. It's either Mike Wick or Mike Week. He donated 50 sec. But if the aliens didn't understand us, then what? Can they kill us? Well, exactly. This is why morals exist outside of social contracts. Like, you can't just say, well, if there's no social contract, everything's morally neutral. So, like, morals essentially don't exist. That's not how it works. Like, that's why it's total nonsense to say social contracts create morals. No, morals create social contracts. Corbin Claypool donated $20. I used to get shaky slash lightheaded slash spacey after eating carbs, and I've tried low carb, etc. Turns out I had hypoglycemia, blood sugar issues, and a vegan diet completely got rid of it. Paleo helped initially, but made worse over time. Yeah, vegan diets are extremely good for glycemic control. If you're eating a lot of saturated fat and cholesterol, eventually you'll get like hyperinsulinemia and you'll get blood sugar issues. So yeah, it like especially if you're genetically sensitive to that sort of thing, a vegan diet can really help. Toby Wong donated 20 pounds. He wouldn't like us stabbing his one animal on the premise that there's a contract that he wouldn't stab ours. But we have love for all animals that he doesn't respect when he eats meat. So why should we not stab his cat? That is sort of a good point. Like, and again, that's why social contracts don't create morals. Like, morals create social contracts. What? Yeah, so I think I'll end it here, and because somebody asked me to sing the outro, I guess I'll sing the outro before I go. Beef, what a relief. When will this? That's stalking. Beef, what a relief. When will this poisonous product cease? This is a fuck. I can't even remember the. This is a public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and how. All right, so there you go. Thank you, everyone, for checking out the stream and donating in the super chat. And as always, keep making those vegan gains.